can't play.
I don't get it. It just feels like at this point now, somebody's trying to make a statement or a point to flex their authority. But, everybody out here looking for attention, and that's what I feel like the mayor wants right now, some attention, But he'll figure it out soon. He better. But it just didn't make any sense. Like, it's unvaxxed people.
Hello and welcome back to Week in Review with the one and only Doooovid. Looking forward to the show tonight. Got lots to talk about, including the Durant IRL shitpost. Doooovid, I'm not sure if your microphone is maybe not plugged in, but I'm hearing a bit of background noise on your end. Over to you for the introductions. Thanks for being with us.
Yeah, good to be back. Yes, I might be my computer's fan. So I got both computers up, so I'll just do the screen shares real quick. A lot of interesting things this week.
I think it's fine now. It's gone away.
Okay, so Jennifer just shared this paper on theoretical fundamentals of gate level information flow tracking. The glyph, which was actually pretty interesting. This was less, I guess, artificial intelligence and more straight electrical circuitry. So I just skimmed it. Maybe if she prepared something, we'll talk about that more.
On that topic, no, I hadn't even looked at it at all. It was just something that got shared, and I wanted to maybe look at it soon, but I just only got it. Like, basically, as soon as I saw it, I sent it to you. So,
okay, here is Columbia's Herbert Irving Cancer Center, and it had some recent evidence about obesity and COVID-19. God forbid, we know the majority of deaths have been in obese people, and there might be some obviousness to it, but exactly why that is. So new studies on that, and also Vincent Raccanello.
Are you screen sharing at all?
Oh yeah, I forgot to screen share.
Okay. At least it wasn't my bad this time. I'll just wait to see which one it is.
Okay, so here's the screen share. So yeah, Vincent Raccanello had a recent paper trying to show that COVID-19 did actually originate from animals in the Wuhan market. So people still following COVID-19 could check that out, or the numbers are way down, although it could be new variants, stuff going on. So Peter Santinello, he was doing some stuff in Los Angeles on Hispanics. Semi-interesting. Here was one in Los Angeles about these mass homeless encampments with a big streamer that interviews homeless people, tries to help out homeless people. So that was interesting. People trying to get a feel for the mass homeless situation. And Luke Ford talks about that all the time. Here's some politics relating to Russia and the chess world, trying to, like the Chess Federation, president of it is Russian, and is a lot of the sponsors of chess are Russian. Chess historically is a Russian-dominated game. But with the pressure for sanctions and strong pressure against Russian players now, so here's some of the politics. Actually, here was a little talk from top chess players. Ironically, the head of the ethics committee of the chess organization is a former Russian Jew who's now one of the top players for Israel, but actually originally comes from Russia, Emil Satovsky. So there's like 2 hours of chess Russian politics. I found this really good channel related to what's going on in Ukraine. So this is like just kind of like map and military. So I showed this on the other day with the task. I'll get that link up also. They have a new video, but kind of these war maps. And so it just kind of has territory, what's going on at various different battles, and the expansion of mostly Russian territory. Like God forbid if like America fell, or there was some form of balkanization. So it's scary how quickly an army could roll through and just conquer territory, as seen here with like red and blue, and the different battles pitched at strategic points. In military news, there's big news from the same channel about this hypersonic missile. I guess goes 10 times the speed of light that Russia fired into eastern Ukraine, western Ukraine, in order to hit a weapons shipment. And so this has been weaponry that has been talked about the last few years that goes 10 times the speed of light and could possibly go thousands of miles. And Russia has used it in Ukraine, God forbid. So that's basically all I got on Russia, Ukraine. Well, I just mentioned, like, I was thinking, like, is it possible that somehow there's an overall Russian strategy that includes Ukrainians and Russians, and to think about that, or even a diaspora? But we'll table that. Maybe we'll talk about that. Here was Yale University professor talking about what kind of computation is cognition related to consciousness. When we make mental activities, decisions, what is going on? How do we classify that in terms of a form of computation? So the main rabbi of Israel, they call like the Gadol Hador, the great man of the generation, not necessarily because he had like a huge following or wealth or power, but just in knowledge, and people went to him. I actually received a blessing from him twice. This Rav Chaim Kanievsky died yesterday or 2 days ago and was buried today at age 94. And it's kind of like a tourist attraction in Israel, where like, it's like if you're an Orthodox Jew, when you go to Israel, you like get a blessing from Rabbi Kanievsky. And he was, the senior arbiter of religious disputes. And, so those videos, and people always asking him questions, getting blessings from him. Lived till 94 years old. And it said, I got a blessing from him when I first went to Israel. And then a second time, but that's common, saying like probably like 10% of Jews in Israel at some point had received a blessing from this man who passed away. So we could possibly talk about that more. I was on Jai Davies again, talking about heaven and hell in Hinduism. So I actually was talking about the Temple of the Vedic Planetarium and the Loka and system of the heavenly and hellish planets. So it's a very esoteric part of Hinduism. So I was talking about that a little bit. It's a lot in Hindi, so she's been streaming more, but it's mostly in Hindi. So if that interests you, I might continue working with her. I referred her to someone locally that speaks Hindi. So I'll probably keep on working with her, but the program's mostly in Hindi, and it's becoming kind of mainstream Hinduism. They had in Israel at Tel Aviv University a huge conference on artificial intelligence. You'd see there's over 60 videos, most of them short, just different updates on various technologies where they're holding. So I hadn't had a chance to watch any of those yet, but if anyone's looking for what to watch, a whole bunch there. Here was a Math Channel number file. I think I shared it before. They're talking about the reciprocals of primes. And so he was looking at this English mathematician who had written a whole book of when you divide a prime number, its reciprocal, when you divide 1 by the prime, how many times does it take for it to repeat? And certain numbers, there's the maximum that it could take to repeat, which is the number itself minus 1. And so there's a lot of prime numbers that do go to this maximum, and even huge prime numbers where, like if you look at like 7 or something like that, that's 1428571 and then repeats. So I guess it could actually be, so it has six letters, 6 numbers, and then repeats, and which I guess is the maximum. And so he did this for like tens of thousands of numbers. He was going over it, and there's even prime numbers into the tens of thousands that basically cover every single number that don't repeat for like tens of thousands of numbers. So just kind of interesting. I was mentioning, I read that book on Erdos and The Man Who Loved Only Numbers. He mentioned there's 200,000 papers on math published every year. A lot of them are just the nature of factors, primes, different theorems about unique properties of numbers, and then seeing if those numbers have properties in other numbers. And if they do have other numbers, if there's an infinite amount of numbers that have those properties. And so, this is just another example of that. I saw the Godward podcast.
I tried to watch this and it was hard. I couldn't even get through it.
The Plato or the number file?
The Plato one. But yeah, what were you going to say about Godward?
I saw you asked a question on it. So this is just interesting on Greeks, or he had another one on the ontological argument. So just some interesting precursor. Nietzsche had famously said that Christianity is Plato for the masses. And you see a lot of the elements of like even the Big Bang doesn't really originate with the Bible. A lot of things that are brought to the West through Christianity are really Platonism. And so the origin of Platonism, how it entered Christianity. So an interesting lecture. And, I guess.
And this notion that Plato was one person, that's misguided, right?
Well, he was pretty.
He's more representative of an ethos at the time.
Well, and I think he's a historical figure. It's not like Pythagoras, where there's less known. Pythagoras is earlier.
Pythagoras has more evidence of existing than Plato does. Plato has almost no evidence in Socrates existing. I mean, they read like Marvel comic books for starters. That ought to give it away. Some cosmopolitan LARPer making a random cult, that sounds reasonable, i.e. Pythagoras.
I don't think you're accurate about that. I mean, you could look into it, but I mean, there was an academy in Athens, and Plato was the head of it, of which.
But he didn't come up with the idea of elements, and that's a common misconception. That's basically what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I mean, maybe that by saying he was the head of the academy, so basically everything in the academy gets attributed to him. So, like as Pythagoras, whether there actually was a person named Pythagoras, it's also similar that there was, Pythagorean cult, and now we don't know so much about it, so we just have this, Pythagorean identity that it all gets attributed to, but was the work of. So Plato, as the head of the academy, has the books, and basically canonizes the wisdom of the time, and he has his own mindset. So the actual historical Plato, there's a decent amount known about him, but you look at it as like a canonization, but he has a unique flavor, and definitely one of the most important thinkers in the West, and also has a huge amount of literature that is in existence till today. And I don't think there's that much of a dispute of some of the literature that that is attributed as written by him, like the Timaeus.
There's also no dispute about whether Jesus was historical.
No, there's a lot of dispute whether Jesus was historical. So there's a lot less dispute of the historical Plato than the historical Jesus. There's a lot more dispute about the historical Jesus than the historical Plato. Plato's an extremely, I mean, he was the head of the academy. The academy was the mainstay of Athens civilization. And we could talk about this more. Like I suggest you research that if you want to have some thesis on that. Here's the Royal Society about lasers and fusion. Here was an interesting lecture about kind of the feedback mechanism between Chinese students and American university rankings, and possibly prices, COVID-19, the future of university, but to know the huge role that elite Chinese students play in university in terms of money and funding, and also getting elite status. Here was some videos on civil engineering. Here was like a ranking of 12 cities. This video wasn't that great, but I'll share it anyways. Just comparing the transportation of various cities: walkability, bikeability, transit, housing, other. Here's a channel, OBF, was interesting, that had video why Europe is running out of electricity and gas, and they had a few other videos that were interesting. Why the Middle East won't survive without oil, why California is dying. So civil engineering related things. Here was the task and purpose, kind of like military video, their weekly update on what's happening in Ukraine. I guess they do 2 videos a week. So one is just on like a specific weapon, and now they're doing one on Ukraine. So it's also pretty good. Just a battle line update. Here's University of California about the quantum reform of the metric system, like the history of the metric system, and then the standardization of how we define these units are mostly defined in terms now of quantum measurement. So just a nice history there of this canonization process, very important to the history of science, even current practice of science. This was also interesting, civil engineering, suburbia is subsidized, just talking about tax dollars, dollar revenue cent, and the history of suburbia, and kind of like a prediction of the class of suburbia. A lot going on in Israel. Zelensky spoke to the Knesset in Israel and kind of bashed Israel, like Israel's not doing enough to help Ukraine. Israel has been kind of playing both sides, walking the line, even fostering reconciliation talks between Russia and Ukraine. But Zelensky spoke to the Knesset today and highly recommended Israel do more to help. So I have some interesting history on what we'll call the degeneration of. Oh, here's one more thing. My high school.
Adulting as a gifted person. Many.
Yeah, so my high school chemistry teacher that I always mention, taught that that had like a 3D model, some sort of maybe, I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to ask her, but they're having a Zoom session about adulting as a gifted person. Doovid went to a special school for the gifted where you're supposed to have 130 IQ to enter. And, the woman in the center was my chemistry teacher who, related to Week in Review. I always mention because she said that the 3D periodic table is really the periodic table is really three-dimensional. I believe she even had some sort of 3D periodic table on her desk. So there's a talk about, being adulting as a gifted person, I guess a high IQ adult. And it's a Zoom call. I haven't spoken to this woman since I was in high school. I mean, she's probably would remember me because she's gifted, probably have good memory. So it's possible I'll be on the call and I'll ask her about the 3D periodic table.
That's Pat Vance or the one on the left? Sorry.
Pat Vance was my chemistry teacher.
I wonder if she'd come on Week in Review.
I haven't spoken to her since high school, so I don't think she lives locally anymore. So we'll see. We'll see what the call's like, and if like if she even remembers. If I'm remembering right, I could ask her about the 3D periodic table. So we'll see.
Yeah, it could have just been something you invented, to win a debate or something. Pat could finally settle this for us. Just kidding.
I'm pretty sure that the first time you mentioned it, I told you that, like, I've said it like 100 times. And even the first time you mentioned your 3D periodic table, I told you that my high school chemistry teacher had said that the periodic table really should be three-dimensional.
Great. Yeah. So, I'm definitely not the first person to have articulated something to that effect. I
don't see how that would have held me into debate. Like, I mean, just whatever fantasy you had.
Well, you're trying to say that my science wasn't anything, but then that's clearly not true. And then even going as far as
anything, but just the concept that the periodic table should be three-dimensional, and I've demonstrated that clearly to you, that there are many people who said that previously, and that that's something my high school chemistry teacher said. She didn't have her own model of a 3D periodic table, but she had been familiar, and it said that the 3D periodic table is really better described three-dimensionally. So I don't even know what it benefits you.
Maybe you can sort of
I don't even know what possible you think you benefit to claim that no one thought the periodic table is three-dimensional before you, which I've demonstrated is clearly false. There's books.
Well, that's a bit of a straw dinosaur of my position there. So I just thought maybe you could break the ice by mentioning the 3D PT that I have. So just a thought, but please continue.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a topic about it. So even she remembered me, and so if there is a Q&A, or if it'd even be fitting to put in the Q&A some random question about chemistry, but it's possible. If it's fitting, I will. And yeah, I was on Ralph's. I think I decided I'm not going to stream with Ralph anymore. Maybe it was already Sunday. Just like that, not laughing.
That Giggle Fest thing, the Giggle Fest. I don't know. So you've streamed with him since the time of the Giggle Fest. Is that correct?
I don't think so. I mean, I had like maybe an argument in his chat with some random person that was trying to talk about Greeks and laughter, and just like dumb, argumentative, non-serious stuff. And yeah, I'm not even sure who benefits or why people do it. I mean, I could explain like my psychological reasons, but so it's kind of like Luke Ford, where he keeps on playing like clips of Richard Spencer or people. So it's like you want to comment on.
He played that one clip like probably 25 at least times. What the hell was that anyway? That just kept getting weirder.
Yeah, I'm just some random person obsessed with like white nationalists. So and not really going anywhere. So he's kind of like a fanboy. So it's not like a deep dive on intellectually understanding these issues or critical race theory. He's kind of like a hater fanboy. So there's really nothing there for me. So I guess my comment on laughter was a good way to end. Okay, so I have considering that what I was talking about, I prepared a little history of the degeneration of music in the West, specifically of the love song to the lust song. So the last few weeks, I was talking about musically the switch from the hero's journey to the loser's journey, and the musical element of the actual structure of the music. And I guess Jennifer doesn't really understand music. Maybe if maybe I'll do a stream on my own channel, or if people that listen to this actually appreciate music. We talk about the actual structure, like Nicholas Petrus. I'm not sure if he still watches this, but the actual musical structure of what it means to be a loser song. But thematically, the hero's journey becomes the anti-hero's journey, and the love song becomes the lust song. And so the basic musical structure of theme, variation, uh, um, dissonance, and resolution in classical Western music would be like major switching to minor, going back to major, and the resolution triumph is by hitting the high C. So Nicholas is in the chat, so awesome. So Nissim Dorme is one of the most famous love songs ever made. It goes to Puccini and Turandot. Let me look at some years on this. So this is only like 150 years old, but it's probably the most famous opera song. And maybe you've heard of it, like dee da da dee da da dee da dum. Um, it's the end of a full opera, and it's like a triumphant, like somehow there's something where like they're trying to win the love of a woman, and he has to stay up the whole night, and the last words are Vinci Row, Vinci Row, Vinci Row, and has a classical structure, and hits the high C. And actually there's been tests on animals and on women that the male voice hitting the high C actually causes women to so to say become wet, God forbid, so that the musical purpose relating to sexual relations is actually seen in the music, and the male voice hitting the high C um, has been tested to demonstrate a physical reaction. Not sure if it's
Wow.
Pavlovian. I don't think it's even
That doesn't
Pavlovian.
sound, that couldn't possibly, that would imply they were pre-trained on some sort of divine frequency. I think it's physiological, where it's like literally vibrational triggering. That seems
It's even
more
been tested in
reasonable.
animals. Like I didn't prepare a study in this, but it has been demonstrated that like the high C has some sort of connection to your female reproductive system responses, and that's also been shown in animals. But so that Nissim Dora, like Vinci Row. Um, but like I was mentioning, romance comes from the chivalry system. That historically, even this, like he earns the woman by on the battlefield. That like classically, maybe in Israel still today, like my grandfather went off to World War II, and then he came back, found his glory on the battlefield and married, his high school sweetheart, someone from his hometown. That arranged marriage was the normal, and that there would be a ceremony where both parents were there and a contract was the norm, really till less than 150 years ago. That doesn't start changing in Europe till 300 years ago with the chivalry, and even that, like the knight earns the love of the woman on the battlefield or through jousting and games, and still like he'll earn the woman, but still it's her father that's going to give her away. But that there'd be some sort of romance where the man would have to prove himself to the woman, and uh, so I'm just in Judaism and Christianity historically, love songs about women were degenerate in general. There were no love songs about women. Love is should be reserved for God. So all love songs refer to God. So in the Hebrew prayers, the Jewish sometimes refer to like a love song, or even like in the Zohar, even like sexual terminology, that all refers to God. And it was considered even forbidden, degenerate to sing a love song about women. So there are some historical ancient love songs about women, but usually, like I said, the love was reserved for the deities, and only a degenerate would have sang a love song to women. And even in the Western canon, you don't really have love songs about women till a few hundred years ago. So like Nissim Dorme is opera, and it's a love song about a woman. However, most songs these days are basically love songs, the structure of the hero's journey. And so, probably like the Beatles personifies basic love songs. And the Beatles are just at the stage of pre-degeneracy. So the Beatles get married. Paul McCartney, actually through converting through Hinduism, finds a wife and stays with his wife his whole life. Even John Lennon finds a wife, stays with his wife, that are largely monogamous, and marriage where he would find a woman and his father would give her away, and so even though the songs are love songs, so Paul McCartney has this famous song, silly love songs. People in the crowd, bum bum ba da 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 dum, dee da 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 dum, and just kind of making fun of himself and all of these love songs. And so I'm going to call the Beatles the end of the era of pre-degeneracy. That after Paul McCartney's silly love songs is coming to the transition point from love songs to lust songs. And here's an example of the transitionary stage. And I'll say like Billy Joel, who has a lot of these halfway between love and lust songs, and kind of like the lounge piano player, and kind of a narrative, interesting singer that, and also the change from the hero's journey to the anti-hero's journey. Like Billy Joel's most famous song, "The Piano Man," sing us a song, "You're the Piano Man," and he tells us a bunch of stories of basically anti-heroes in the bar, people that dreams are not going to come through, people that are bitter on life because their desires aren't being met, and that's why they hang out at the bar listening to the Piano Man. But I think this song, "Scenes from an Italian Restaurant," which is an interesting song that starts out like bottles of red, bottle of white, and has like an interesting transition, but moves into what they call the Ballad of Brenda and Eddie. And it's kind of like a story of high school romance. Brenda and Eddie, uh, and Brenda and Eddie and the popular studies and the king and the queen of the prom. Nobody looked any finer or more than a Parkway diner. And it goes on and kind of like, okay, they were the high school sweethearts. They get married, and then you'll get divorced and have failed relations, which is like the degeneracy of the 80s, the increased divorce rate. And like Billy Joel is the lounge singer, where people we'll call like JF serial monogamy, where like even like Destiny today, where you had this period, the degeneracy didn't just go from the classical hero's journey of the struggle to find the woman and then marry her and build up a family and earn the acceptance of her parents, to serial monogamy, where even the acceptance of the parents weren't that important, and the expectation that the relationship wouldn't last. And so Billy Joel's kind of like this transition of the love song to the lust song, and almost all the songs are kind of like that. And he himself marries I think Christy Brinkley, one of the most famous supermodels. This is later, even like Duran Duran, "Come Undone." So this post in the 90s already, when like the love song has fully been transformed to the lust song. Maybe I'll go more into that next week. So in the 80s, you have this transition from the love song to the lust song. And Footloose, there's a famous movie with Kevin Bacon. I'm not sure if you ever heard of Footloose.
I have indeed.
So, I
Maybe
mean,
even seen it.
Doovid's like the complete boomer now. Like even Jennifer hasn't heard of half of this stuff.
Oh
But
no,
like,
I know about Footloose. It's one of those movies that I never really watched in full. Like it was in the background at some house party or some random thing, and I can't remember anything other than some incredibly salacious dancing.
yeah, I mean, Kevin Bacon comes from the big town, and he's a dancer, and like he has his kind of like relations that like the type relation that wouldn't be expected to last, but like high school relation with the preacher's daughter, um, and the like the theme of the movie is, should they do like a high school dance of mixed dancing? So Kevin Bacon's this male dancer who moved from the big city, and everyone's upset about this mixed dance. And um, but the music, some of the famous "Holding Out for a Hero," Bonnie Taylor, "I Need a Hero," he's got to be strong, and Eric Carmen, who I'm going to Almost Paradise. I'm going to mention Dirty Dancing next. Kenny Loggins, Footloose, is this switch from um, love music to lust music, where the expectation of the historical love music that you're going to find the woman, earn her love, earn the respect of her father, marry her, and build up a family, isn't even part of it anymore. And it's not even about marriage. It's going to be scoring the woman, moving into premarital relations. And so it's still a love song in some respect, but it's switched from the love song to the lust song. And so this is like Footloose, major music transition. I'm going to examine this song also, George Michael's Careless Whisper, 80s music. You know this song?
Maybe.
I'm actually going to sing part of this song. So this song has a saxophone. So like the rise of the saxophone in this kind of like lounge music, but like serial monogamy and also the beginning of gay culture. So these like male singers that have serial monogamous relations and then also end up homosexual. So the main thing I wanted to talk about was Dirty Dancing, 1987. Are you familiar with Dirty Dancing?
Yeah, that's Patrick Swayze, right?
Yeah. So you know,
Yeah, I'm
one of the
familiar with
greatest.
that mainly from Trailer Park Boys.
Yeah. So I'm going to. Okay, I'm going to close down now. Uh, Computer, I'll move to my library. Now I'm done with the screen share. So if you want, I'll sing a little bit of a few of these songs to the lust songs, and they're really pretty good actually. Like some of these lust songs of the '80s are really great music, but it's not quite like I mentioned the Offspring, where it's not quite um, the anti-hero journey, but it's not quite the hero's journey, and you don't have the same hero, and because the triumph is really just like getting a girlfriend, having sexual relations. So, Careless Whisper, 1984, George Michael, saxophone. Um, uh, should have known better than to cheat a friend and waste the chance that I've been given. So I'm never gonna dance again the way I danced with you. Does that sound familiar to you? It's one of the most popular
Oh yeah, I
songs.
know that song.
I mean, it has like hundreds of millions of views. George Michael, I guess he was in another band like the Jitterbug, and then became one of the most popular singers in the '80s. Um, Interesting lyrics, like you say, like the switch from the love song to the lust song, and from the hero's journey to the anti-hero's journey. Um, what was these lyrics? Yeah, time can never mend the careless whispers of a good friend to the heart and mind. Ignorance is kind. There's no comfort in the truth. Pain is all you'll find. So I'm never gonna dance again. Guilty feet have got no rhythm. Though it's easy to pretend, I know you're not a fool. I should have known better than to cheat a friend and waste the chance that I've been given. So I'm never gonna dance again the way I danced with you. And it's actually a pretty good song. I remember in the park, like people karaoke. It's on the radio, even like in the supermarket, elevator music. Like legitimately one of the top 100 most popular songs ever made. I was just mentioning, like, here, this pain is all you'll ever find, and this nature of serial monogamy that eventually leads probably to homosexuality. So this song is 1984. So Dirty Dancing is 1987, but it's a retro movie made to take place in the 60s. And most of the music in the movie is from the 60s. And there's two songs that they made for the movie that were written for the movie, namely Hungry Eyes and Time of My Life. And those were kind of like retro music that were designed to sound older than they actually were. And those were also probably two of the most popular songs of the 80s. And till today, I wouldn't be surprised if both Time of My Life and Hungry Eyes are some of the most popular, well-known songs. You know both of those songs?
I think so. Yeah, I know Hungry Eyes for sure.
Yeah, so that one, it's basic lust music. It's a very good song.
Yeah, that's
That-
really lusty. Yeah, there's that's probably explains why I really don't like listening to the lyrics to pretty much any song. It's so lusty, isn't it?
Yeah, like I've been meaning to tell you, I've got this feeling that won't subside. I look at you and I fantasize. You're mine tonight. Now I've got you in my sights with these hungry eyes. One look at you and I can't disguise. So I mean, it's really a great song, actually. But as I mentioned, degenerate, because really any love song, even Paul McCartney, even Nissim Dorme, from a pure rabbinic, all of this is degenerate. Like love songs about women are forbidden in any manner, even like a proper hero's journey of monogamous, earning your wife.
I'm reminded of this Catholic periodical my grandmother subscribed us to, where they said if there was a song on the radio that was catchy and you couldn't get it out, you had to just like switch the meaning over to something holy. So I was thinking Hungry Eyes, you could just switch it over to meaning referencing a pizza.
I mean, John Edwards has mentioned Grease, but I don't think Grease really has such great music in it. So I mean, I'm not sure like Saturday Night Fever or but yeah, I mean Grease also. So Grease has more musical and is also the degeneracy of um Borderline. Like Grease is 1978, and although they might be having premarital relations, there's still so already like Dirty Dancing, it's premarital relations that are guaranteed not to last. So like, and it's retro dated, but you're saying that the assumption of waiting till marriage, and even thematically where she goes against her father's wishes, the heart of feminism, the heart of modern romance, where the woman chooses her own mate. It's not her father that chooses the mate for her, and the conflict of the movie, where her father has someone else in mind than the man that she wants, which goes back to Shakespeare. But so these classic themes. But and this also, I was looking that so these songs were written by songwriters. So I've had the time of my life is really also a great song that is basically lust music, less so than Hungry Eyes. Um, but it's I would still classify it as the hero's journey. Like the structure, Hungry Eyes is more like two parts. It's not even a hero's journey. It's kind of like disco, just a 1-2, high part, low part, and even the high part, Hungry Eyes, is I think in a minor chord and largely dissonant. So there's not like a resolution of a triumphant. It's basically all dissonance. uh, Time of My Life is more a classical hero's journey structure, and it's like it's a retro song, so it was written in the '80s to sound like it was older than it was, and it's a duet, kind of like Grease, with a male and female voice. In this case, Jennifer Warnes and Bill Medley. So I looked at Jennifer Warnes. Uh, I guess was a vocalist. She did a lot of soundtracks. Her most famous song is "Lift Me Up" that she did with Joe Cocker, and she actually chose Joe Cocker. "Love Will Lift Me Up." I have to look into that. And she did a lot of soundtrack songs. So I'll do a quick rendition of this. I've been waiting for so long. Now I finally found someone to stand by me. We saw the writing on the wall as we felt this magical fantasy. Now with passion in our eyes, there's no way we could disguise it secretly. So we take each other's hand because we seem to understand the urgency. Just remember, you're the one thing I can't get enough of. So I'll tell you something. This could be love because I've had the time of my life. No, I never felt this way before. Yes, I swear it's the truth, and I owe it all to you. I found it interesting the second refrain that she says, with my body and my soul, that she actually mentions soul in that. And I looked on, like, I think she was involved, the singer of it believed in reincarnation and was involved in some sort of like Buddhism. Uh, but yes, I was thinking about that in the origins of degeneracy in Western culture, and the move from the hero's journey to anti-hero, which probably transitions from the love song to the lust song to the loser song, like what we see in Radiohead and the incel movement, which probably rises from the fall of the love song. So once you have the love song, and people are going to look for the monogamous relation, you don't have so much of the incels. But once you have serial monogamy, you have the rise of the Chads and Stacys or whatever, because the people are not going to get married; they're going to be serially monogamous, and then there's not enough girls to go along for everybody because people aren't getting married, and the rise of the incel movement, and it probably transitions like that from the 70s to the 80s to the 90s. That the 90s, they didn't have, like, the incels became a computer internet thing, so you have the rise of the incels probably in 90s music already, the alternative music, like I was saying, Alice in Chains, the glorification of death. um I sang that Radiohead song Creep, which I call the anthem, the incel anthem. Offspring, Self Esteem, which is maybe the Chad song, where the Chad is the person that shares a woman, to just complete degeneracy. Where you have maybe like Destiny Today, where it's the Chads are not even into serial monogamy, and are
Is
just,
Destiny the Chad here, or his wife, or the presumable numerous bowls of the wife? I'm confused. I was totally following up to that point and riveted.
well, I guess to call Destiny's like an anti-Chad, but I guess he's the Chad, the degenerate Chad, because he's not an incel, and but I mean he's
So
still a
he's an
computer.
anti-Chad of the Sigma degree.
Well, he's not. He's a Chad of the internet era, because the classical Chad who was an athlete, was cool, shined at the party, has switched to internet culture. So he, like, Destiny's probably like a geek, a gamer, and he's arisen as a Chad of e-culture. But just the fact that he's not an incel, like, he dates models, and he has cam girls, and God forbid that he's kind of like an e-Chad, but like, no, he's probably like a basically a computer geek, and he wouldn't be your mainstream Chad of party culture. That it's more like a Revenge of the Nerds through e-culture, and so destinies are relatively quite rare in e-culture. That incels are and because most the number of e-girls is very small, and even like God forbid, like cam girls, or God forbid, but for every like 20 men on the internet gaming, there's like one girl. So like the serial Chad, and also this point where the homosexuality is mainstay. So already, like George Michael, I'm not sure if he was homosexual, but most of the 80s singers like Boy George, Duran Duran, that have this serial monogamy also are probably becoming homosexual because there's probably some sort of
Oh, what? I'm so lost here. This is becoming unhinged. It was really good for a while though. So this is your conjecture, I take it, or
Well, I think
oh,
I mean, Destiny's an open bisexual by saying that this era
okay.
of the degeneracy of 80s music, that your famous 80s singers, a lot of them are homosexual or are suspect homosexuals. I mean, you have your known ones like David Bowie and Boy George. I'm not sure if, like, George Michael may or may not have been homosexual, but there would have been suspicion that he was. But a lot of your mainstream 80s musicians were openly homosexual. Most famous, I guess, like David Bowie and Boy George, and even your bands like you don't have your regular chads like your heroes of serial monogamy. Most of them are also suspect homosexual or open homosexual and into the entertainment industry uh, to the modern day
Well, it's to the
where
point that you got to cover it up if you're straight in certain niches because of the salience of, like, I don't know, certain
well, I mean,
movements
so at this
across
point,
the last 50 years.
at this point, probably the majority of chads are openly bisexual, and in the music world, the people who've succeeded in the entertainment business in today's day, like Destiny, are openly bisexual, and like Destiny's not a good because he's an e-celeb as
Isn't
opposed
he
to
more the Revenge of the Nerds type where he like takes a bunch of sorry, like psychotropic drugs and talks at 50 million words a minute and dominates the chads who are, scared to even talk to him type thing?
well, I mean, he's an
Not that I've
e-chad.
seen that much of his stuff, so sorry, it's hard to know for
Well,
sure.
I'm saying he's an e-chad, so like he's getting the e-girls, or yeah, I mean, he's basically getting the e-girls, and the e-girls includes, God forbid, like porn stars who are also online now too. So, but I saying the classical, he's not like a George Michael. He's not like an entertainer. So like as a Chad of the era, like no, I mean, he's not like George Michael, who the no comparison. But I'm saying from the E circuit, he's the E Chad. And there could be like Revenge of the Nerd that were so technologically driven that being an E celeb could land you a girl. But very few. So it's not the classical way, like the
Well, not
classical
with
way.
that attitude.
Well, yeah, I mean it's almost like pejorative, even like the Groyper movement to say that it's almost better to be a Valcel, that if to be an incel and just say I can't land a girl, but it's saying like because
This
the
is
girls out
basically what
there.
monks have been saying since antiquity. So I don't know why you got to use all these hip new age words here, but yeah.
Well, that's why I opened it because I said from the monk attitude, love is wasted on a woman. Period. That I mean, even for a typical Orthodox Jew or maybe mainstream Catholic, that like you love your wife, you take care of your family, but love is wasted on women. Love is meant for your relationship with God, and the love that you have for God is a significantly higher level than the love you have for your wife. So that's mainstream classical theology that till 100 years ago, like probably everyone basically thought like that. It was like, okay, I love my wife, but not the same kind of love that I love God with. And the type love that I love God with, like I'm not going to sing to my wife. I'll sing to God. But like like singing something special to show my true love, and my true love would not be wasted on a woman. Like that would be a degeneration of some pure sign of love affection, like singing. And so that's why I mentioned that love song in general is a form of degeneracy. So the incel is already post like in the atheist world, and so I was just trying to trace a narrative with the music. I usually open up with a chant, and this concept of the hero's journey versus the loser's journey, and music representing the culture, where unfortunately, we're a product. You can't be a hero in a society that doesn't have heroes, and so the anti-heroes, really all you could really be is an anti-hero, and so the music is representative of that, and there really is no mainstream popular music these days that represents the hero's journey. And so it's probably symbolic of the decline of empire. At this point in Western culture, there are no heroes. There's only anti-heroes, and it's seen in the music. As so if you look at classical music, religious music, you could clearly demonstrate the hero's journey. And so like if you're an Orthodox Jew, if you're like a Hindu or Hare Krishna, you could have the hero's journey in your subset culture because you could still um, but you can't be a mainstream hero because what it takes to be a mainstream hero in your what it takes to be a hero in your subset culture isn't going to make you a hero in mainstream culture, and the heroes in mainstream culture are basically all anti-heroes.
Tinkle would like to know your favorite 80s band.
I don't have a favorite bands like that. Like this is what I listen to. Like I largely renounce myself from music. I don't listen to music, only chanting. Samish is mentioning Bowie. Like yeah, he was married to a beautiful model, just like Destiny. That there's a connection between like being homosexual and beautiful women, and part of that is to entice men. So like if you're trying to get men who are not homosexual to like you, and like God forbid if someone's homosexual and they're trying to entice men to like them, that's the role of the beautiful girlfriend. So say like okay, like if Destiny or Bowie is saying he doesn't really like his beautiful wife, he likes men, and he just uses his beautiful wife to sexually arouse men towards his wife, and then would sublimate or transfer that attraction that they have towards his wife into homosexuality. And
Well, I'm just thinking of like the beard. No, that's what they call that, right?
the beard.
Yeah, the woman is like a beard. I thought that was the name. Is it well? I mean, I'm trying to say it's a well-known phenomenon that this happens. So very interesting stringing together of particular irrelevant events to form an overall narrative. Definitely one of your best works yet, which is bore out in the audience numbers, which just went up a lot. So I guess nice job
Yeah, I
there.
mean, like beautiful women don't make good wives. So it's saying like homosexual
Wow. Wow.
homosexuals um you marry beautiful women because they use the beautiful women. They're not interested in a good wife. They're interested in the utility they could have from a beautiful woman. But like generally, um, like beautiful women don't make good mothers. They don't make good wives. And like so the hero's journey from the love song to the lust song that like the Beatles, they're not trying to score a supermodel. Like Paul McCartney and John Lennon don't marry models. They marry average women that they fall in love with, and the scoring of a model uh, is already the switch from the love song to the lust song because you don't fall in love with beautiful women, you lust after beautiful women, and most beautiful women are beautiful uh, because they're promiscuous, that or whatever, because they have comported their life
Don't
in a
you mean
way.
they're promiscuous because they're beautiful? Not the other way around.
Um, No, I mean, I think they're beautiful because they're promiscuous. In fact, Edward Dutton had a
So having
study.
sex with a bunch of guys makes you beautiful. Is that right?
Yeah, that's what people find beautiful in the woman is their promiscuity. Ed Dutton, I shared it like a few months ago. Dutton did a video on that. Uh, actually makes them more masculine. That promiscuous
It's
women.
actually a mystery, but all right. I suppose you could argue promiscuity, maybe there's some sort of emanating sensualism from that, but yikes. Yikes.
Well, I saying that there's also the paradoxical that desire for virgins. So you can't. Your virgins are virgins, and don't know what they're doing. So if you want to be promiscuous, you have to be promiscuous with women with experience, and like the fantasy of God forbid, like a bunch of virgins is usually inaccurate. So like if you're going for large amounts of relations, you're going to have that with promiscuous women, and so the type desire that you would desire from a virgin is usually to make her your wife, to make her a mother of your children, and she's not going to be attractive in the same way as a promiscuous woman. And also like the athleticism, uh, but we could talk about it more. It's
What
hard
about
to
athleticism exactly?
that women who make themselves attractive to men, um, women who it's usually like women who desire power and use their sexuality to advance in the modern world, and also with promiscuity. But I have to look up the Dutton video, but it said that generally men find promiscuous women attractive. That
That
you
guy
could say
has some
that
of the dumbest takes I've ever heard for
you
how
could
smart he sounds. It's the
you
Claire
don't
Kaw
find
effect of like these people only think these people are smart because they have that British accent. It's the whole Michael falls in love with a mentally challenged girl from Arrested Development trope. Anyway, back over to you, Doovid.
is that you don't find virgins attractive because you want them to maintain their purity. So that like the type sexual desire a man would have, like the lust song applies to promiscuous women because you're not going to lust after uh, your proper women that are your virgins because it's something they say you like they wouldn't it's probably not proper to talk about, but the degeneration of culture where virgins are rare, promiscuous women are the norm, but who people lust after is women who know how to have sexual relations, and they know how to have sexual relations because they're promiscuous, and that's why they're good at it because they've done it many times, and that's the type woman that men are going to find sexually attractive, so that it increases with the degeneracy. You have more and more promiscuous women, and creates your Stacy Chad culture, and so you're like Destiny or something, but like with his God forbid, his open relationship wife, which
That seems to have affected you. It made quite an
well, I
impression
saw
on
he
you.
was on. I did watch his debate with Nick Fuentes, who is like at some point also like the leader of maybe the Val cells or incels. Like so either you could fall into the Destiny camp or the Nick Fuentes camp. And so if you're in the
Or
Destiny camp,
possibly some other camp, right? But if you're
well,
in
as the
that
dichotomy, they debated each other.
dichotomy,
They were also on Politically Provoked again last night. Um, but like Destiny's the mainstream role model of modern society. That
well,
you're saying you work hard, you get ahead. You too could also um, you enjoy the debauchery and degeneracy of modern society. You also could have relations with a supermodel, kind of like Billy Joel. Like I said, Billy Joel was the transition stage of love music to lust music, and Billy Joel married a supermodel. He married Christy Brinkley. At least he married her. But that the thing that even the phenomenon that a good man would desire a model is a sign of the degeneracy. Like a good man doesn't desire a promiscuous woman, doesn't desire a model, doesn't desire a woman that is famous for flaunting her body. Saying like in India, like the head of the Hare Krishna temple in Detroit, the chaste women. Like we praise chaste women. In Judaism, modesty is a virtue. But that so in modern degenerate culture, uh, there's no value to chastity. There's no value to modesty, and so that's why. So if you're an Orthodox Jew, you could have your hero's journey within your own society, but you can't be a hero to larger society because what it takes to be a hero in larger society is contrary to the principles of so the chaste, the modest woman. So that like are you following at all what I'm saying?
I've heard this a gajillion times. It's just like, yes, I'm aware of this notion. My question that comes up is like whether romance and like whether romance is a thing on its own and can it exist without lust.
That's why I did that song, "The Time of My Life." You're like, this could be love because I've never felt this way before. And as opposed to love, that's something that's built through loyalty and through tribulation, and even like the classical love song like chivalry, where you earn the woman through conquest, not conquest of her, but conquest on the battlefield or in tournaments, and through the winning over of her father to the um you're winning the woman at the nightclub, the switch of lust. So the lyrics in that song, this could be love because I've never felt this way before. And so it's saying, well, I'm attracted to this woman, I'm probably in love with her, I have sexual desires for this woman. And so it's the confusion of the blurring of the line between love and lust. And like if you're in Orthodox culture, if you're in a Hindu culture where marriage is like a meeting of families, it's usually arranged. The marriage ceremony is like an amalgamation of families. Uh, that the lust principle goes counter to the love principle, and the degeneration of society is moving away from the love song to the lust song, and it's saying, how do you know it's love? Like Van Halen, I can't tell you. Love Bites, Def Leppard, a lot of these 80s music, 90s music, just the blurring of the line of love and lust, and it's saying, well, if the goal is to gratify sexual desire, and love is just a word that you use for people that you have, God forbid, illegitimate, forbidden sexual relationships with, and those almost always fail. That most of those relationships don't last, and it'll be demonstrated afterwards that the love wasn't love; it was just lust.
Sure, yeah. There's a question about why priests are attracted to boys. I can see two reasons off the bat, but I don't think it's an exhaustive list. One would be, if you had those urges and wanted to take yourself out of the possibility of acting on them, priests have a celibacy, and or you could be like a predator. So any good theological organization has, obviously ways of effectively getting rid of those unwanted things.
Yeah, and really, like all the music of the '80s is really quite degenerate. They like like
It's
the
been
love.
that way since like 2,500 years ago. I mean, arguably 5,000 years ago. But
Well,
yeah,
I
I
mean,
guess
compared
there's
to the
been a bit
Beatles,
of a acceleration.
I'm saying, like, compared to the Beatles, I mean, the Beatles were also considered degenerate, but I mean, just compare the Beatles' love songs like Paul McCartney to the '80s. Like you think like Def Leppard or Van Halen, um, that I mean, there's no comparison. Like it exponentially increased the amount of degeneracy, and then just from the '80s to what you think like Van Halen, Def Leppard. I used to like that song "Love Bites." I'm thinking the lyrics like, "I don't want to touch you too much, baby. Making love to you might drive me crazy." Love Bites. I mean, it's just degenerate. I even saw Def Leppard live, but it's just a glorification of forbidden sexual relations. I think Van Halen has another song like that, and almost all their songs are like that. Where like Alice in Chains doesn't really have any romance song; it's a glorification of death. It's a post lust era where of the '80s there was still some sort of thought that something could be achieved through the gratification of sexual desires. To then you have the grunge era where even the Chads are like a precursor to the Valcel incel movement where there's nothing there to it and they're already glorifying death. But and that's the point I tried to make was tracing this clearly in the popular music of the time through songs that probably people know. I mean, Kirk there saying like it sells, but it doesn't sell anymore. Like the Beatles don't sell anymore because it's a sign of the times. So the typical old romance love song no longer sells. You couldn't make a hit song today about like the boy that like the boy meets girl, falls in love, gets married, builds up a family. Even think like Cats in the Cradle, Cat Stevens. Uh, it's just a basic family structure song that goes through the life, finds the woman, builds up a family. You can't make songs like that anymore. It wouldn't sell. So I was saying in the 80s it may have sold, but it wouldn't sell anymore because society has changed, has become even more degenerate.
Mm, honestly, don't really think it has changed that much.
Because
I think
you're
an
not into
awareness.
popular culture. You just
No, I
you're
know about popular culture. I think an awareness has risen
you
that
listen
makes
to the
it seem
radio.
like it's gotten worse, but it's not. It's actually starting to get better in certain ways, and the crushing hopelessness is part of the reasons I think things might actually start to get better. Whole notion of hitting rock bottom and everything. The fact is that no,
Yeah, but I'm saying, what
things
are
are
you
really not
referring to
that.
songs? Are you referring to songs that are hit songs that have came out in the last 10 years? Like the
I'm
songs that
talking
I
about
mentioned
what it means
were
for
the
there to
most
be
popular songs.
civilizational degeneration and how it's actually not really that accelerated in the last while. It's just that our understanding of how things have operated for quite a while is more clear.
I was mentioning the most popular songs of their time. So you're talking about the most popular stuff of this time frame. Um, yeah, are you saying you follow that? Like you turn the radio,
That
uh,
doesn't exist anymore.
well, the radio as the
Because you can only
medium.
have that kind of centralized culture when you don't have this internet niche effect, which is basically how things have been striding, if you will, for the last little while. Well, I mean,
You
what
still
is
have top
popular
40.
culture?
You still have rankings. You could still see the most popular songs. You could still look at the top 40, top 100, the songs that go platinum,
Sure.
and you're saying, no, I mean, like you tuned out. You're saying you went away from the city center and you you like the JF approach of avoiding the degeneracy of mainstream society. But it's saying like if you went to the city, what would be the music that you would hear playing? And so like this stuff I'm talking about doesn't play
People
anymore.
who listen to that
People haven't
music
even heard.
don't,
Like I mean, like
they're not
even you
like,
haven't even heard of like half the stuff I'm talking about, let alone like people younger than you or that are into modern culture. They haven't even heard
that's
of this
like
stuff.
saying people are into McDonald's. Are people really into McDonald's or do they just eat it because it's there? Right?
We're saying people were into Def Leppard in the 80s because it was there. Your average kid these days have never even heard of Def Leppard. And like I can mention the song, even like Dirty Dancing, you're like probably most kids never heard of that. They don't even know these songs. They don't even know these movies. They don't know what I'm talking about. And if you played those songs for them, they wouldn't find it interesting.
Maybe not.
Well, I'm saying it's factual that like I mean, that guy on Browse was like like you like I was saying I don't laugh like I must not be around kids much, but like no, I mean I teach, I coach, and that's one of the things you around kids is cultural references that kids don't know the cultural references and they haven't seen these movies, they haven't heard of this music, and they don't care. And if you tried to nostalgically like make a younger person listen to it, they wouldn't find it interesting because that's a sign of the time. Music is generational.
That notion is quite a recent idea. This different generations thing, it's not really a thing. It's just a way to sell t-shirts.
No, I'm saying it's. I mean, people argue about diversity, immigration, and just like what does it mean my culture? But it means like that most American kids now never heard of Def Leppard. They're never gonna hear of it. Like heavy metal, rock music is pretty unpopular. It's probably never gonna be popular again. And the generation is defined by what was popular. So like Psalms, like I chanted that song, B'ni al Talik B'derek Hitam, my son, don't go with the time, the ways of the time. go with the immortal, timeless wisdom, because what's popular of your time is not going to last. But the generation is defined by these ephemeral things that like the personalities Destiny or something like that or 80s Dirty Dancing, Def Leppard, Van Halen, the things that in the future no one will probably know about, but if you were part of that generation, these were big names, these were things that defined your generation.
Destiny defined my generation.
Well, he's just a common. I mean, he's an e-celeb. He's just a common celebrity culture defines generations, and saying that you have the long-term names like, okay, we're science people, and you mentioned Newton and Leibniz and various things because they made a discovery and it's useful hundreds of years later, as opposed to celebrity culture where those people are not useful for future times. They're useful for social reasons and cultural signification, but that's what defines the generation is largely the celebrity culture, the entertainment culture, uh, even politicians, like things like who was president in your time or major events, like the war in Ukraine. That now we're but if you're a young kid right now growing up during the war in Ukraine, might be definitive of your generation. You're a kid who grew up, as where I'm a kid who grew up with the war in Iraq and the various wars in the Middle East, as opposed to the Vietnam War. These are definitive, but also entertainment culture, and part of it means that people haven't heard of it. So like things like science, politics, international affairs, educated people, is like, oh, haven't you heard of like Vietnam, the Vietnam War? They say, oh, I should probably know about that. That's probably important, although most people probably don't care about it, as opposed to, what was popular entertainment in the 80s. Most people don't care about it. It's not important what type of songs I listened to when I was a kid. Your average person couldn't care. They're not going to like those songs. They were addressing things that have already changed and have no meaning to the current
Daryl
people.
has cited some children reacting to old videos as evidence of how wrong you are, Doovid.
Well, those are popular. I haven't looked on Time of My Life. I was looking up, and they had reaction videos to it, like African Americans or younger people who were reacting to it. Um, but no, I would say those reaction videos are proof of what I'm saying. One, that they haven't heard of it, that they're reacting to something like, oh my God, like people actually listened to this and found this interesting in the 80s. Um, but and we could move on. So, I'll go more into the music and think about it more. This transition from 70s to 80s to 90s music. That I would say from the mainstream heroes narrative that degenerated from the 60s to the 90s, where you already have the anti-hero and the transition from the love song to the lust song to modern day, God forbid, even like orgy music, like literally like the downtown city synagogue, the dance party. At this point, it's just like orgy music. God forbid, it's not even lust songs.
Titan says kids more than 30 years younger than I am know the Beatles as well as I do.
I don't think so. So, and like, I mean, the Beatles are one of the most popular bands ever. So, like, they're pretty well known, but they're known less and less. And like the songs, like maybe a handful of songs that people would know, and they know in relation to events or being around their elders. That they think of the Beatles as symbolic of what previous generations. They might know the Beatles because the Beatles is one of the most famous bands of the 60s, most famous music, but it's symbolic of the generational change. And even if it, like my niece, um, even prepubescent, knows the Beatles because plays in the background. She drives in the car, it's on the radio, and various things. My sister and my mother probably told her about it, but she connects the Beatles to the past and to the generation. So when my niece thinks of boomers, she thinks of like, oh, when the Beatles were popular.
Well, maybe there's a lot of truth to what you're saying, and then there's some phenomena. I don't know if you want to call the Beatles a cultural phenomenon, but yeah, some
Celebrity
transcend
culture.
the quote generations, and they have more salience for whatever reason. One could speculate why the Beatles are still so well known if they are. But I think I would agree that in high school, a lot of people were into the Beatles for seemingly no reason.
Well, when you were in high school, maybe because their parents, there was like they were still in the radio. The Beatles are still pretty popular. Did you know that Billy Joel song, "The Piano Man"?
Yeah, it sounds familiar.
You know, sing us a song. You're the piano man. Sing us the song tonight. You got us all in the mood for a melody. And he, tells stories about people at the bar. Um, there's Davy in the Navy, and this leans. If I could get out of here, and but he's a narrative of archetypes, and so Billy Joel becomes famous enough to lay out kind of like Woody Allen type style, but of just these pop culture archetypes, and also the Beatles. The Beatles are their songs are symbolic of the archetypes of the generation. So the archetypes that Billy Joel talks about in The Piano Man are different archetypes than the Beatles, like Penny Lane, Eleanor Rigby, um, Sergeant Pepper's. Those are archetypes that are specific to the 60s and 70s. Those archetypes, by the time Billy Joel comes around, don't exist anymore. And so when Billy Joel, like the lounge, the night lounge, uh, I don't know if that maybe makes more sense to you, but saying archetypes change, and the songs personify the archetypes of the culture of the generation. And so when you listen to the Beatles, you're understanding archetypes that don't exist anymore, and you're looking at your parents, like before your parents got married and settled down and changed. Uh, that those were the type archetypes, to looking at to help you understand who your parents were or who the previous generation was. And so even if we mention like the 80s music, so if someone like, never heard of Def Leppard and looks up like Def Leppard Love Bites and something like that, and they're like, wow, that's a pretty good song. That archetype doesn't exist anymore. You can like, oh, that's a pretty good song. But it's a personification of an archetype that doesn't exist anymore that could help you understand, the what was the world like that and the people that created the society that we're currently living in.
Yeah.
I mean, you could still have like a Davy who's in the Navy and probably will be for life, like the Billy Joel archetype, but like not really. Like there's no like you're not going to go to the bar and meet a Davy who's in the Navy and probably be there for life. That's more an 80s phenomenon.
You ever seen any of these people live?
Yeah, I mean, as a kid, we had season tickets to the local theater. I saw almost all the big bands. I saw Billy Joel live. In fact, when I became bar mitzvah, I got a CD player and a few Billy Joels. And Billy Joel, I think, is like a quarter or half Jewish, and also like Dirty Dancing, intermarriage between Jews and Gentiles. Uh, but yeah, I remember seeing Billy Joel live. I liked his music, although I like more like rock and hard rock. But I always liked Billy Joel, but I never really listened to him. Like I listened to him when I was a young teenager. But if I heard on the radio, and then like in Israel, uh, people like with older people, there's certain songs or you hear, um, but it's somewhat of a memory of a bygone. It doesn't like the Piano Man now. I think that was a pretty good song. It's one of the most famous songs ever. Also, like probably top 500 most famous songs ever. Uh, but it's setting a scene that doesn't exist anymore. Like of going to a lounge and you like people sitting around putting dollars in a piano in like a musician's thing trying to get him to play songs. And you might be able to find that phenomenon. Like if you went to a resort or a certain bar, like you might find yourself in a situation where you were at like a bar and there was a musician there and you're like, do you know this one? And like paying them to know this one, play that song, or like a park musician. Uh, but it's not what you'd find in I mean, there's all type of bars. So you like even in Detroit, there's probably a bar with a guy at a piano that still plays Billy Joel, but it's not your popular bar. It's not the archetypes that are definitive of what's creating modern culture. It's an archetype of what existed in the 80s, and the archetype is only important today for someone who's largely living in the past.
AKA everyone.
Well, I mean, to some extent, but it was saying that's not relevant. That they're saying like, what kind of music do your parents like? Um, I mean, it's definitely relevant, but it's less relevant than it's generational. That's why I said it's what was popular in the previous generation, and as the generation dies out, uh, there'll be a few historians. Some things will last. It's possible, like Piano Man. I mean, that's got along like the Beatles. I mean, there's certain things like music that like Benny Goodman. I mean, Nicholas Petrus here, he's a musician, but certain songs lasted after all of the people that were alive when those songs came out have already died. But even like Elvis, people don't listen to Elvis anymore. Like even my mom will occasionally watch Elvis music or listen to Elvis, but that's from a previous generation. Once the people who were alive during that time die out, those songs will hit a few history books, or but no one's going to listen to them anymore. So it's only relevant because people alive today are still symbolic of those archetypes, but those archetypes will be reincarnated, will be reshuffled into similar archetypes, and you could have historians that are musicians that know this stuff, but your average person won't. So just say like, yeah, your average young kid today could probably name even 5 Beatles songs, but your average kid today probably couldn't name 5 Elvis songs. Can you
Good
name
point.
5 Elvis songs?
I'm not sure. I know that he died of drug overdose, and I really like the movie 3,000 Miles to Graceland. It was about an Elvis tribute band slash
Yeah, but at the end of the day, like
robbery.
you're hitting a blank. Like you don't have a single song coming to your mind when I
No.
say Elvis. Can you name 5 Beatles songs?
Nah. I don't even want to bother trying. Sorry. I
Yeah,
can't
but
think
your
of
average
one.
person probably could. Like, I mean, Yesterday, Sergeant Pepper's. I mean, there's a lot of Beatles songs, but it's saying like even uh,
I've always quite hated the Beatles, to be quite honest. Sorry.
but it's saying that
I don't
even
get it. Like, I just do not understand what the appeal is, but okay.
well, I was saying it's a archetype of the previous generation. So if you're looking at the mistakes of the previous generation and what is representative of something negative, that the music could even be upsetting to you. But you're saying the music is representative of the archetypes of the generation. So I was talking like the lust culture is representative of the degeneracy of society of serial monogamy. So the 80s serial monogamy was like the late 70s to the 80s, serial monogamy was becoming the mainstream cultural phenomenon, and didn't really exist in the previous generation. Most people got married young, and I mean there might have been a few characters, but that wasn't the norm. And then the 80s already serial monogamy started becoming the norm, to where in the 90s it changed. So the music might be representative of something that irritates you, and
No, it's just that I don't. The kind of never mind. It's just too complicated to even go into. Let's not.
maybe your deep dislike of the British.
Oh, you went there, didn't you? Why? Why?
The Beatles has represented the decline of empire, and also like the India.
So
The
I should
Paul
be
McCart-
happy that they're going out in a tailspin of comical proportions.
well, the Paul McCartney survives degeneracy by becoming a Hindu. So I mean, the ironic Paul McCartney becomes a Hindu, and George Harrison becomes a Hindu and survives degeneracy through Hinduism, and even the collapse of the British Empire from owning India to the leading figures of British culture taking on Indian culture.
Someone in the chat, Dog Pluto says, but my family always had drunken parties and songs from those parties trigger anxiety. I see quite a few people like this that are, I don't want to say Puritans, but averse to quite a bit of these lifestyle, purely hedonistic endeavors.
Music always represented the hero's journey of courtship, like even in ancient times, and you go to the ball, you go to the family event where the your boys and girls are brought together, and there's music there. So there's always been a connection, and I even mentioned that the connection of the high C or musical notes in the female reproductive system. That there's always been a connection between courtship and music, and so when people are of the age where they want to find someone of the opposite sex, uh, they will usually do that under music. And so the connection of music is usually connection to dating, how they fell in love, and the commonality of the songs they listen to, especially with the automobile, like I was into civil engineering, that had been riding in the automobile listening to songs, and it would have been a connection between how you met your the partner and the type of music that was happening when you met your partner.
Was that a question?
Well, I didn't ask you, but I'm saying you would probably know, like, you could probably come to mind, like you met your husband, that you might even remember the circumstance and the music that was playing, or that, when you were first romantic with your husband, that you probably listened to music together. That so I wasn't asking as a question; I was just saying it straight up as a fact. But without I didn't need your experiential history with it, but I would assume that it's just factual, and high 90% of people have a connection with music to their romantic history, and even decades later could remember the songs that they listened to that were part of their early romance.
I remember one time I played a More Chiba album, really pissed off my boyfriend at the time, but no, I definitely have no experience at all connected to what you're
It was a good
describing.
you played a Marchiva, and it's like this relationship is not going to work.
Yeah, exactly. Should have known at that moment.
Should have known better than to cheat a friend.
Yeah, I don't want to chuckle on the stream. I know you don't like it, but that was pretty classic. I can see why you would think that that would be a thing. I think I could kind of relate to that 'cause there's definitely some music that reminds me of a certain time in my life, but like times were awesome for reasons that didn't really have anything to do with that.
Well, because
Like
mass
happiness.
gatherings are usually together with music. So you remember, when your whole class, school or people were together, there was probably a song playing, and that song will be permanently, chunked permanently in your memory with
It's
that
more just
event.
like in first year we had this fucking epic kegger. And the circumstances surrounding that epic kegger were, great. And I'm sure there's some music from around that time that I would remember fondly, for example.
I have books on music and memory, and is related to chunking theory. I've mentioned it in my video on chunking theory, but historical events are connected strongly to music, and music will evoke historical events. And there's usually periods like where everyone's watching some show, like music in movies, music in TV shows, music played at public gatherings, where the music will, I mean, if you want to put it like in more scientific chunking theory, but it'll become archetypical of the memory, and the same music will evoke the same memory in the masses, and that's why it's a generational thing, where the same music evokes the same memory from the majority of the people of that generation. It's definitional.
Yeah, right. Just because everyone can remember something doesn't mean it's the same memory. Absolutely no reason to believe that it would be.
Well, it is the same. I mean, you might have a different response to the memory, but it's the same memory
It might be
because
the same impression, but even that is quite a stretch. Because I could cast doubt on the idea that we all experience the colors the same way. That we would experience all the sounds the same way, given that we predominantly identify meaning through sound, is an even bigger stretch.
no, I mean, if you're talking like the Beatles or like thinking like CCR or something like like the songs that so I mean if you're thinking Alice in Chains and the song The Rooster and you think musically I mean, I love that music but when I was younger but the war in Iraq uh or that was even before that but that it was definitional to things in that era. So when people think of the song, it brings them back to the early 90s and evokes those memories. You might have a different reaction to it, but all people, it would bring you back to the memories of that era. That's why it's symbolic, it's definitional of the generation
Yeah,
because
it might trigger a memory that happened in a particular time interval, all the more reason to believe that it wouldn't be the same one.
well, no, it'd be the same one. I mean, just like you think, like Billy Joel, um, okay, like Ronald Reagan or something like that. Like if you're like in America, Ronald Reagan was a household name. Like you probably mentioned, your parents mentioned Ronald Reagan just like Trump multiple times every week. So you could have whatever your reaction is to that. The music takes you back to the era and the events of those era. That if you live through it, you remember that, and that's why it's definitional of a generation. I'm not talking about the specific emotion, good or bad memory. I'm saying it takes you back to those time frames, and it's generational because certain events define the generation, certain music define the generation, and it evokes the purpose of basically of a moment in time.
And so basically, none of these identities are going to be necessarily recognizable between these particular time intervals, is the argument, if I understand it correctly.
Yeah, so I mean, you weren't alive in the '60s, so if you're thinking like Beatles music, you like you like Vietnam or something like okay, like
But
my
I went
dad.
to like a Yoko Ono art show in Toronto when I was 16, just par exemple.
Yeah, but saying you didn't live through Vietnam, and so like the Beatles don't necessarily evoke in you Vietnam. Like your parents, the Beatles probably evoke in you Vietnam, and even like Vietnam, it's like some hypothetical like yeah, countries go to war, and that was the war at the time. Um, but you're saying if you live through the time, or even like the Kennedy assassination, or like the names of Nixon or these characters that are basically unimportant to us now, or maybe evoke basically nothing, but just like Trump evokes strong emotional reaction. So people who lived in that era, the events of the day evoked strong emotional reaction in them, and the music triggers that. As where in you, it wouldn't trigger that because you're not from that generation. It's not definitional of your, your place, location, and time. It's definitional of something that happened before your time.
Right on. Well, I'm sure many in the audience, as well as myself, were enriched by that summary.
It was like, where were you when Kennedy was assassinated? It was like, okay, well, I don't know. I mean, maybe I was in a different body, but like, no, I wasn't alive then. It didn't, but where was I when 9/11 happened? Saying like, well, no, I remember that. It was a large event, and even the music related. Like I remember, uh, large gatherings, everybody watching the same thing on TV, and certain songs playing. That's evocative of the time of that era of what was happening at that time. and even like cultural figures that cultural figures will step up and take sides on political issues, but most of the characters from the 60s and 70s are relevant. You wouldn't even know their name, but that was that would have been like if you popped on the TV or opened up a magazine, the people in the time, the names that they were thinking of. And so you could look at your time as, okay, like these characters I don't think are going to be lasting or relevant, but they're temporarily relevant because they're the common names that people know, like sports teams. uh, I don't even follow sports at all, really. I don't even know if I can name any players on my local sports teams. Like I'm just out of it. But if I was thinking of times where I interacted more, like, yeah, I knew the names because the names came up. People are always, I lived in New York, like Derek Jeter, and, those names were always being talked about. Like I knew the names. Uh, and that's generational.
A lot of people getting nostalgic in the chat, I think.
Yeah, I'm explaining a meta cognitive process.
Well, to me, it sounds like you're explaining impermanence through a particular example of the evolution of culture via, random personalities that rose to prominence and their
Specifically
entanglement
music that
with
would be well
people's
known.
emotional and therefore memory triggers.
Yeah, I mean, even you had heard quite a few of those songs. That those were, like that's a commonality, that like generational. Maybe I'm a little older than you, but generational, that we remember the same music, and then we could nostalgically look back at the music and trace the change in society through what was popular at that time. Like I could remember when Billy Joel was still popular. I could remember, when Dirty Dancing came out and it was the most popular thing on the radio. I could remember, these are memories I actually have. Um, that it's not theoretical; it's evocative of me remembering living at that time.
Well, someone in the chat has assured us that you're still following. They are still following you, so nice. Right on. So, anything else happened this week that was interesting?
Not really. Like I tried watching a little bit. I listened to like the first 30 minutes of your stream the other day. I mean, it's good you're talking about math and science, and it's probably good to be, conversant with names and theories and ideas. Um, it takes a lot of work, and that's why I said, like, if you're talking about some mathematical proposition, why is it important? And then like a common language where you're just going to mention a famous name in a theorem, and like a piece of music, you say like time of my life, and it's going to be evocative of a song memory that you're going to mention, like runga kutta, or some mathematical theory, and it's going to evoke an idea that immediately comes clear to my head and how it's applicable to some idea. So that's extremely important. And so conversations like that are important, refreshing, using math and science regularly, like practice problems, thinking through processes, like that video you showed on I already forgot, on circuitry or information theory. So it's always good to be learning things, and then historical analysis of the progression of ideas in terms of I'm always harping on you, some sort of historical processes of understanding, like, no, like they didn't have this idea at that time, they had this idea at that time, and the progression of ideas that that's somewhat the pinnacle of scholarship. And even like publishing a paper to understanding what did people know, when did they know it, and how did the progression of ideas manifest itself. And a lot of times that's one of the signs of expertise, of really understanding ideas, is understanding the progression of ideas. Because I'm saying, I know the current ideas on the market, and I know what I'm pushing forward. I know what my ideas, I know the significance of my ideas. I know what existed before my idea. I know, what my ideas did, and how it advanced and progressed things. And so that's kind of like the pinnacle of wisdom, where you've created wisdom and you could place the wisdom in the progression of humanity. And even so like Wolfram or something like that, where you could talk about people that used his idea and built new ideas off of it, and looking at new work today, and it's like, oh wow, these ideas I came up with decades ago, that people were able to use those and build off of, versus like generational reincarnation, talking about ideas from hundreds of years ago. So that's always interesting. I'm still studying math, but we talk about like publishing the paper. If I get a chance to ask my chemistry, high school chemistry teacher about the 3D periodic table, but it's a lifetime of work, and certainly I think IC3 was talking about. He asked you something about like social engineering, so like music, politics, culture are part of social engineering.
Yeah, it's extremely general question. So I do like questions, but when they're too general, it's hard to know where to start. So what social engineering is? If once you have a society, you're sort of, it's on some level implied it's going to be engineered somehow, either by its own mechanical processes or by intentional intervention. So then it's a question of, well, what about so the phenomenon like of, or the framing of social engineering? How do you want to go into that phenomenon per se?
If you're explaining processes, so if you're giving histories, you have to give some sort of starting point to, this is what society was like, and this is what society is now, this is what society
Yeah,
was
but what
like.
about the whole like we can't know thing? Shouldn't we be focusing, just like you just did, on the whole we can't know thing and make that the starting point? Because what's known is always relative to stuff that nobody in the present time has any emotional connection to.
I mean, it's like your stream on axioms, where you talk like an hour about axioms and not come to anything, but you could agree on a certain amount of commonality to you don't have to get caught down into existential questions just to have a conversation, that you could agree to some amount of terms that this is
I
definitive.
think you do for theological reasons, to make sure you stay in conformity with the edicts of your religion. Don't you think?
No, you could have a productive conversation with just a generic agreement of terms. I mean, like it might be.
You can have the appearance of that, but it is never truly that, unless you're
Well,
already familiar with the person.
You could have a productive exchange of information based on, like I said, social engineering. This is what agree that things are kind of like this now. Things were kind of like this in the past, and then talking about the processes that caused it to change from what it was like to what it is. That you don't have to even have common axioms to have a productive conversation about, so to say, social engineering. Just some sort of tentative understanding that certain things are definitional of what it's like now, and understanding of what it was like before, to talk about the processes that changed from what it was like to what it is like.
A lot of what we know is relative to stuff that's happened in the meantime. So how can we subtract all of our modern biases to get into the perspective of some random farmer even 500 years ago? I mean, that's such a limited understanding compared to what we have access to, let alone what people are actually exposing themselves to in the modern day.
It's a progression of ideas. So, I mean, if you look, this idea came and it transformed society, an examination of what was to what is.
Well, we don't have that. We can look in, I mean, even if we had all the information that academia could offer, which is a very tenuous thing, we still wouldn't have anywhere near the totality of what was comprised social engineering.
I think social engineering is relatively well defined.
We don't even have a metric for the degree of penetration or any way to estimate how the scholastic system influenced changing of language, changing of customs, changing of beliefs and all that. Like that's not at all how we understand history.
Well, even if it can't be quantified, you still have a qualitative
It can be
understanding.
quantified, but you have to have a language that enables it to be quantified, and we don't have that now.
Well, you do. I'm saying you have celebrity cult. You have what was popular then and
That's
what is
not
popular now.
quantifying, that's instantiating via a particular aesthetic. There's nothing you can then measure and turn around and say, like, oh, you know, Destiny's 30% less of a douche than this other guy, for example.
We have numbers. You have metrics. Like you could, like if you're looking at like critical race theory of the Frankfurt School, you have the origin of the idea, the spreading of the idea, and then the effect of the idea, and that could all be quantified. That you have a point where you have the school in Frankfurt and the origins of these ideas to either the emergence moving to Columbia and departments and the change in curriculum to where this becomes one of the mainstream things taught, and that's all quantifiable and could be historically traced. And then to talking like a social engineering, a changing on larger society. So I mean, just cause and effect in pure science, just in logic, cause and effect is very difficult. But historical cause and effect is more complicated. But it's like you could talk about it without talking about the science of history, the philosophy of history. So we have a little bit.
Well, then what are you talking about, right? Like, are you actually understanding things the same way, or is it just reference to the same totally
Yeah,
hollow term?
you're looking at history in a causal and effect manner.
Sure, that's what anyone could say. I just want to come to some of these audience questions, though. Don Willis wanted to know what I thought about the stream yesterday. I thought it was awesome, and I didn't get stressed hardly at all the whole time, which I consider a big plus for myself. And the quality was really good, and everybody seems to be improving in whatever, at least one area. And that's what I like to see. So some of these times I'm not listening well enough to what people are saying, and a lot of times it just would take me longer than the amount of time to really parse out some of the questions. So I got to figure out a way to slow it down so that I can be sure I understand some of these questions before launching into what may or may not be a at best tangentially related fact. But the way we got to the points that were made was quite organic, which is great. So if you want to see that example build up, it started on the question of axioms, which I don't want to say is unanswerable. I could give an answer that would be unfalsifiable, just like was my rhetoric some time ago, where rather than try to build something up from first principles, I would just say something and land it in an area I knew because of the vagaries of language that I could just say something that literally nobody can deny. So it just sort of takes the wind out of the sails of certain people who would be coming at, theses with particular issues of a technical nature that very likely had no bearing on the ultimate utility of the system itself. So the axioms thing, which then turned into whether the speed of light was an axiom, which I thought was an interesting way to phrase it. Because just sort of scanning my memories of the times I've been in math classes and physics classes, stuff like that, like have any memories of somebody referencing the speed of light as an axiomatic constant. I suppose I could check in my physics textbook under the special relativity section whether there's actually that word in there or if it's a presuppositional thing. But given this connection with E naught and mu naught, which is the point that I made, sort of tying it all together, that you don't need to assume the speed of light is constant. You can derive it from other things, but you have to assume a certain number of things. So it might be getting close to a principle that there is a minimum number of assumptions that is required to start to reduce potentiality to a certain domain. And the way to instantiate that inevitability is through examples where, I guess my shorthand version of what I was trying to get across was whether we can use rigorous brute facts as axioms. because Easy had asked about whether one could conclude an axiom, and I'm guessing this is on some level a misunderstanding because we have our terms defined differently. So I was trying to recurse to a point where that wouldn't happen, and it's sort of the same thing as what's happening now. It's the more you go into the consciousness stuff, the more you're in a minefield of potential cognitive dissonance. Now, is that true universally? No, but there are always taboos in any array, and they will always cause cognitive dissonance. One of those taboos happens to be certain many aspects of consciousness right now. So that's sort of the bog morass thing that we are treading into right now. And therefore, any progress is good progress. So obviously, I'm just as interested to know what other people thought. But for me, I thought it was great. It seemed to actually push certain conversations forward. And when you can conclude something through your own reasoning, like you're following a train of thought, like with Doooovid's story, except it's more technical, it's a lot more salient because it's a bit like deduction, but deduction subconscious. It's almost like climbing up a mountain versus climbing down it. Daryl says the constancy of C and the equivalence principle foundations of general relativity. Right. That. Yeah. But we also have this historical thing, right, with the connection of the permittivity of free space and what order those things were understood. And it's hard to look back because it's hard to really know at what point these things were understood in the way that we're looking at them now, right? Like in 1,000 years, they're going to say that we invented quantum physics or discovered quantum physics in modernity, and we're going to probably credit that to somebody like Mendeleev. Or, me. But anyway, it was great. And I can't find the section in my book right now because I don't have it bookmarked. Oh, wait, here it is. I've got a bunch of formulas. From what I understand, that math is sort of so intrinsic to physics that when you think about axioms in physics, you're thinking about the axioms of a vector space because you want to impose this mathematical structure on your system and have access to the power of calculus. I will look at this more. I'm not seeing anything at first glance about any axiomatization of the speed of light. I'm seeing something about covariance. And we'll see where that goes when I have a chance to look at that more in the future. Don't like to do these things just live on stream because then I end up sounding like a bit spaced out. All right. And so one conversation that started to go kind of bad, but ended up getting saved was accounting for the success of calculus. Like I didn't actually expect to fully give an accounting for why calculus succeeded because that would be many books. Because like Doooovid says, you need to go into the historical development. It's not just calculus. It's what it means. What does calculus mean relative to all the other math that has ever existed? Will ever exist or could ever exist, right? Right. So axioms, and we notice there are some conflicting definitions of axioms, right? So something taken as a given versus something assumed as a starting point for reasoning, not the same. We could say that in some sense that gravity is axiomatic because it's impossible to disprove it, but no one's starting necessarily with that. In science, that would be something you conclude. So those very good points there about where you start and what it's called and how you reason. That depends on the domain of inquiry. So you could have a conclusion in one domain, then become an axiom in another. I thought that was great because conversations seem to make that point self-evident. All right, so Daryl seems pretty sure. Yeah, it sounds reasonable. And I wanted to ask like the math people whether there's a difference between things like constants and axioms. When you have, for example, gravity is gmm over r squared and g is a constant. Now, could we say those things are axioms somehow? I don't know. I just sort of throwing that out there. Also noticed somebody had asked about axiom of choice, and I didn't really get to that. That is another highly contextual conversation about whether it makes sense to be able to choose numbers basically at will or on a whim, what they mean when they say arbitrarily. I would start with the Banach-Tarski paradox if you're interested in that type of reasoning. My model's predominantly geometry/form based, and I don't want to say deductive reasoning, but it's very directed reasoning. So we don't really have any concept of an axiom of choice. We define ranges of possibility, which are diminished over successive measurements. And yeah, I thought it was cool. And that's Lacey here. So I look forward to the next one. I don't know how often it makes sense to do one of those, or if it makes sense to do them on a regular basis or just like as requested. But I'll just keep on with that and looking forward to the next one. There were some mathematical contributions, which I really liked. So if you could draw that audience, I'm not saying only math people, but any familiarity with math functions process is really useful for this type of thinking. Computer coding to an extent as well. All right, so that's my week review. I'm trying to think, did I do anything else? Yes, I did a bunch of other things, and now I could go into them. Let me see here. I have some pretty interesting images. I was sharing them earlier. I don't know if that was, I'm in this category theory server because I'm not exactly sure where to go in terms of the quantum computer technology. And so I think if I develop this simulator framework a little bit, it'll be more self-evident. And this is an interesting example of an image. From what I don't really understand how this works, but it's obviously some kind of a program simulator running over and over and refreshing it, making it sharper from one iteration to the next. You can see that at some point there's diminishing return. So the return from here to here is good, good, good. And you keep going up, and eventually there's diminishing returns. So try to think of it as like auto calculating the threshold diminishing returns per compute power and like self-resolving that as you go. What do Hindus say about laughing? Don't know how much I've read about what Hindus say about laughing. I've pushed back on Doovid's overly ogre-esque views about laughing, in my opinion, with the concept of Leela, which one could, surmise might precipitate laughter. But one could also say that, well, we, really shouldn't be laughing at all. And the only reason we're laughing is because we're stressed from over-socialization. I wouldn't really take well, it's degenerate. Laughter is degenerate. I would never take that position, even if it were true. It's hard to say exactly if it is absolutely true. I wouldn't say so, because that implies there's only one type of laughter, and clearly there isn't. There's defiant laughter, there's nervous laughter, there's excited laughter at the very least. There's genuinely, that was funny, AF laughter. I'm sure we all know. So, yeah. I would say laughter is indicative of things that sometimes often are not good. Like if people are laughing at the teacher in class, that's not good because the teacher's there to help them learn, and laughing is undermining the ability of the teacher to teach. But then laughing at a joke kind of seems, well, like that was the point. And then we'd ask, like, well, what's the point of making a joke? And then it's down to the domain of what's a joke. So I guess it would be a more nuanced discussion as to why we're feeling the need to laugh so much, whether we believe our beliefs about laughter are conducive to better experience of life or whatever, knowledge, civilization, however you want to frame it. Complicated question. It's never about an act, though. It's about whether your intention aligns with a principle. So how that principle manifests depends on particular circumstances. The principle is always the same. In other words, what it means to laugh is not something that you can just know independently of the situation. The best you can know is that there be a particular distribution of situations that would have associated probabilities of inducing laughter.
Yeah, I was trying to explain that guy Stellar, I guess, who used to be on Babs and now is a regular on Ralph. That I guess, Christian, but biblically, the mainstay of laughter is related to the downfall of your enemy, and kind of like the one who laughs best, and specifically related to the righteous, that it would appear that the wicked are getting ahead, but the wicked will eventually have their downfall, and the righteous will have their reward, and that will be evocative. Oh, pardon me. Of humor, of laughter, and of messianic times, like of this future laugh at the end of days. But yeah, I mean, there could be multiple triggers of laughter, and even if it's degenerate in that way, that laughter is a connection to basically taking enjoyment into bad things happening to the people you dislike. And you could try to reduce all laughter to that, or to so when Ralph was trying to like, God forbid, he showed the
He really
funniest
sounded like a rat when he was laughing at you there, didn't he? He's like, he sounded like a villain of some sort. You're like, laughter's degenerate, and he's like, some sort of Captain Planet villain.
Well, then he showed that, like, supposedly the most funny thing in Germany, and it was just degenerate. It was like, I would say it was like homosexual, but it was just guys talking about their private parts. And then this other guy came, and like, what was funny, and it was like like some guy peeing on another guy in a public place. It was just like guys talking about their penises, God forbid. And it's like, that to me, it wasn't funny. It was degenerate. And so like basically it was demonstrated of my point that laughter is a sign of degeneracy, that like, no, that's not funny, that's just disturbing and sick, and only a degenerate would find that funny. And but I mean, if you say there is positive laughter serves some sort of cognitive function, and like, it's
Have you ever
like,
heard of breaking the tension? Laughter breaking the tension? And that's
well,
a
that
good
is
thing
exactly
because
my point.
it's like singing, kind of. I'm not saying that that's my position. It's just,
Well, I was saying the point of degeneracy, that laughter is an involuntary reaction that reveals something about the subconscious. So if the tension, like, like, Ralph, like, why are you playing this video about perversion? Like a bunch of
well, it
guys
shouldn't be
saying,
a why. He already played the whole jerk fest, computer program thing from
yeah, so
Silicon
it's like,
Valley or whatever that was.
yeah, I mean, so like releasing the tension to be like, Ralph, this is disturbing and sick. Like, what the hell is this? You said, well, it's the most popular show in Germany. And it's like, well, God forbid, the most popular thing in Germany is disturbing and sick. And so, like, laughter is releasing the tension of, I was mentioning the hero's journey to the loser's journey, the love song to the lust song. So you say, like, oh man, like, our society's really degenerated. Um, so laughing releases the tension. So, like, what are you going to do about it? You're like, oh man, like, this is really bad. Like, we're like, our society is degenerate. And so laughing just kind of releases the tension, And so like I'll be degenerate too, I'll laugh, as opposed to like, no, I'm not going to laugh. And even as maybe if I had kids, I tell kids all the time, like, that's not funny, that's mean, because usually people laugh at being mean to other people. And like kids, you'll find someone teasing somebody, making fun of somebody, or laughing, or God forbid, common thing is someone will have a disability and people will laugh at them. So like, oh, if I had a kid and they had a natural reaction to laugh at someone in a less fortunate situation, like a disability, injured, less fortunate, that you would have to explain to your kid that's not funny, that's mean, and the reason you're laughing is because your heart is full of hate and meanness, and so laughter is something that has to be cured, but it's involuntary. So laughter demonstrates the current state that a person's in. And so, what do you do with the fact that you're in a degenerate society? And so, well, I'm not going to laugh. I'm not going to condone the degeneracy that we're part of, and that laughing, is you would call like, I mean, it serves some form purposeful cognitive function of dealing with our situation, but it's somewhat like a form of condoning. And when like the retarded kid is struggling, when the person trips and drops everything and everyone's laughing and saying like, don't laugh, help them out. And saying like, I've done that a few times. And saying like, don't laugh at the person that's changing the garbage, help them out.
Yeah. And then saying that all laughter is bad, that's what leads to people laughing at people because they don't have any outlet for it. So it comes out in an avalanche of social pressure.
Well, I'm saying the natural nature is to be mean, and laughing is
That's
indicative.
projection, I'm afraid. Not everybody has that hateful inner nature to hurt other people.
Well, it's not projection. I'm saying that. I mean, that's what the sages. It's what the texts say. But even if you said that it's not the natural nature, you didn't accept that principle that the animalistic nature is mean, and laughter is indicative of the animalistic nature. And that's why the typical thing this was, if I had a kid, I would be disciplining my kid for laughing, because I would say that generally laughing, it depends on the circumstance, but I was saying like, yeah, I mean, like coaching, that people laugh at misfortune, people laugh at bad things happening to other people laugh at people in bad circumstances, and you have to, like as a educator, say that's not funny. If you find that funny, there's something disturbed about you. Like that person just hurt themselves, that person needs help. You laughing at them is a sign that you're a bad person. And so if you're just going to say it straight out, that like, no, man, that's my story, I'm sticking to it. That I take your laughing as a sign that you're a bad person. And I'm sorry if you think you're a good person, and you think your laughter doesn't mean that you're not a good person. So my interpretation is disturbing to the person, because they're like, I'm like, I mean, so at least they might have a desire to be a good person. They're like, no, like I want to be a good person, and I thought my laughter was just natural, or something, and now you're telling me my laughter is intrinsically a sign of there being something wrong with me, and not just something wrong with me, but me basically being a bad, mean person. That so in the self-improvement process, you're like, okay, why am I laughing? Seeing the root of my evil heart, and then trying to penetrate my heart so it's not so evil. So I had an involuntary laugh response because I'm a degenerate, because I'm a mean-hearted person. But when I observed myself being degenerate, I was able to become less degenerate. So you have to have the meditative observer effect, where you could observe yourself and I don't want to be a bad person. I don't want to be a mean-spirited person. I don't want to take pleasure in the suffering of others. But there's something natural about the human condition to cause people to be mean-spirited and want to hurt people or take pleasure in the suffering of others, and that could be indicative from the laughing experience. So when I see myself laughing, I reflect and saying like, "Wow, I'm not a very good person because I have the instinct to laugh," and then try to correct it. So occasionally I'll have like a little, usually just an exhale of air, or like a like a and I'll be observing myself, and then I'll reflect. Usually it's obvious to me why I'm laughing and why it's a sign of my bad character, and how if I refined and perfected my character that I wouldn't have thought in the way, like, why did I find that funny? Because I have bad character, and because I observed myself finding it funny, I was able to observe my bad character, and the first step to character refinement is the recognition of my current state of bad character. And so part of that could be just the self-observation process of what causes me to laugh.
All right, so you feel you laugh for degenerate reasons, I guess.
I use my own laughter as a method. That when I laugh, I interpret it as something defective in me, and then I try to use the fact that I laugh to a self observation to find that defective part of my character that caused me to laugh. And if you call it a projection, and that's how I interpret laughter in others. When I see other people laugh, I just interpret that as um, a revelation of their self conscious and of their bad character, that the laughter is demonstrative of their desire to as to have is to let their bad character uh, be portrayed and be dominant and suppressed. That that the it's an unconscious involuntary reaction, and the person laughs as a revelation, like, okay, like I may be acting proper and not on my animalistic desires, but I laughed as a revelation to be like, no, in my subconscious I really am this animal with the animalistic desire, and that's what laughter is conveying to the other person. And so it's like you're like Ralph and the whatever, talking about penises, God forbid, and just be like, this is disturbing and degenerate. Why are you playing this stuff? To the laughter and saying, like, no, like what I want to reveal to you is I'm a degenerate. This is actually what I want to talk about.
Hmm.
Like in a fair, like you're saying, like someone, I mean, sometimes like people are so reckless and commonplace in bad behavior that they'll just tell you about their bad behavior. So if you're like, God forbid, someone just telling you about like people they beat up, or like how they cheated on their wife, or how they stole stuff, and they're laughing. You're like, ha ha ha. You're like, I went, you're like, I'm having, God forbid, this affair with my wife, and she doesn't even know. Or you're like, I'm cheating this person, and that society is so degenerate that people won't even be embarrassed to just tell you about. They'll even brag about it. That and so laughter, and so when you laugh at that, you're kind of saying like, wow, like, can I get away with being a degenerate like that too? So when my friend, God forbid, tells me about how he's cheating on his wife and laughing about it, and she doesn't even know, and I laugh at that, am I thinking, wow, maybe I could get away with cheating on my wife too? And that's why you're finding it funny, because it's a it's
I always
something
thought it
dark.
was like feeling bad and then laughing to like cover it up, maybe. I mean, not that I would laugh over cheating, that's not me, but that's what I would think someone was motivated by if they were laughing about cheating.
Well, I mean, think of the example of like, the person who drops all their books in the hallway, and everyone's laughing like, ah, loser, and as opposed to helping him out. And like the point, like where I would be like, that's not funny. Like if you find that funny, you're a bad person. It should change. You should repent. Oh, but like the typical, the majority of kids would find that funny and saying, because it's not the natural, like being good and helpful.
Not because they're bad, but because they're nervous and giggling.
Well, it's saying because the bad I'm using synonymous with animal nature. So if you want to erase like bad because some sort of too subjective of a judgment, but saying funny is animalistic nature, and in the competitive world, so there's is the essential biblical humor is the downfall of the wicked. That's funny because because the wicked don't have an immediate downfall. So it's humorous because it's a delayed reaction. So when the wicked eventually have their downfall, the righteous could have a laugh. And that, it's like everyone else thought that you could sin and get away with it. Everybody else thought that you could be a bad person and have a benefit. However, the righteous person knew that it was just temporarily and that you can't sin and get away with it. And the wicked person, although they might temporarily being appear to prosper, that long term karma is factual and it's not going to work out well for them. So the righteous person has the delayed laughter uh, from karma playing itself out over a long term process. And if that's like a righteous indignation, and it's kind of a so people kind of believe in karma, like a T jump or something. God forbid is like new hairdo, not surprising. But from T jump's perspective, from your average person's perspective, like Putin's destined to fail. Like he's bad, he's going against norms, and although it may look like temporarily things are working out for him, it's certain to fail, and he'll have his downfall. Because people expect this biblical righteous indignation karmatic factor that even if it's delayed reaction, that karma's factual. And so, if like a T jump perspective, you're like, well, no, I mean, like you might be right that Putin's a pretty bad guy and he's doing bad things and doesn't have a justification, but that has nothing to do with whether he's going to win or be victorious. So it's very possible that Putin, everything bad that's said about him could be true, but he's still going to emerge victorious because karma is just a faction of the of the imagination. So if he's like, no, karma is factual, and I will have the last laugh when my understanding of karma is proven right. So all these people who thought, that Putin's going to get away with this, uh, that when he eventually has his downfall, I will laugh. And so that's your epic biblical sense of humor. And it's, say from your T jump, that was my argument about karma, and that just looking at the situation in Ukraine, most people intrinsically believe in karma. It's like you can't do that and get away with it. They're like, well, why not? You believe in something like karma? Karma's not factual. What makes you think I can't do this and get away with it?
Yeah, it does come up, doesn't it? Quite a lot.
Well, so I'm putting that to the biblical understanding of humor. So that's the biblical karmatic sense of the righteous laughing, because said like you can't do that and get away with it. Like it may appear that you could do it and get away with it. It may take multiple years for the karma to eventually hit you, but karma is a fact and you can't do that and get away with it. And I will reserve my laughter for the end of days when God, becomes revealed that karma was factual and that you can't sin and get away with it, and the righteous get rewarded and the wicked get punished.
I just keep thinking about how of magnetic resonance, when you keep thinking about all these evil things, then that's what you attract. So we usually think about positive things so that we attract that. Just seems to be a very narrow mentality. Sort of lends itself to a hall monitor mentality, wouldn't you think?
Yeah, so it's like funny if you trick the hall monitor, like God forbid the crude example of the guy laughing at how he's getting away with cheating on his wife and saying like, oh, and she doesn't even know that I'm lying to her, and like so the humor and tricking the hall monitor and beating the system. So it doesn't have to be as bad as like, cheating on your wife or something like that, God forbid. But you're just beating the system, that it was humorous, that it's parallel to this biblical, the rules were kind of dumb in the first place, and you knew that no one was really going to follow the rules. So if I could trick people into um, breaking the rules and them not realizing that I broke the rules, that's funny, and people will laugh at it because uh, it's some sort of recognition. So the person who laughs at it is like, oh, maybe I could cheat on my wife too. Like, do I really think that the bond of marriage is sacred? Do I really want to forsake all this pleasure that I could potentially be having? I could probably, lie and trick and find some other woman willing to have relations with me, and then fool my wife and our circle of friends into not knowing that I'm doing this. Um, versus something that is, that is maybe like speeding, or some sort of ridiculous rule, where it's like, that rule was ridiculous, and you didn't really expect me to keep it, and the fact that I found a way around your rule, and then in telling the story about how I did that, that's funny. But humor is related to karma in that sense. That's why I said the biblical expression of karma is the laughter that the righteous have at the downfall of the wicked, that the essential form of humor. And so if humor, you have the laughter of the wicked, who laugh because they think that they're going to get away with their wicked deeds. So the most common form of humor is the laughter at the wicked who reject karma and are laughing at the righteous. That the wicked laugh at the righteous because they think the righteous are dumb, because we believe in karma, and we withhold and renunciate from sin, as where the wicked believe that there's no reason not to sin, that you could sin and get away with it. And so that's the biblical sense of humor, that the righteous only have the righteous indignation of humor because the wicked laughed at the righteous, uh, and then the delayed reaction of karma and the downfall of the wicked, that the righteous person, so to say, laughs last. And you might be able to interpret all humor like that, where you have the laughter like I could sin and get away with it, and then you have the laughter of laughing at the wicked who thought that they could sin and get away with it. So the wicked are laughing at the people who think that you can't get away with it. So like, ha, 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 of course I can get away with it. You fool. What makes you think I'm not going to be able to get away with it? Ha ha ha. And then the righteous have the last laughter, and saying that no, yeah, I told you you're not going to get away with it. And now you had your downfall, and ha ha ha, the joke's on you, not me.
The laugh off. Tinkle asks if any other animals laugh. At least rats do, but I'm pretty sure there's a bunch of them that
Yeah,
do.
we talked about it in the past. Like,
It's a social reflex, isn't it? Maybe it's a socialization reflex.
Yeah, and a lot of times it's related to like laughing hyenas, or it's it, laughter is actually a mystery. You're saying there's no good scientific model that explains laughter. So even like laughing hyenas, gorillas, uh, rats, uh, none of the explanation of laughter is well understood. There's some theories, but it's still largely a mystery. So that's probably why I enjoy talking about it. And it's also like the distance that people think that, because everybody laughs, they would assume it's something understood, and they don't appreciate that laughter is actually a deep mystery.
Well, they don't want to think that something they enjoy doing is degenerate either. So maybe they get defensive on that and just don't listen to anything else at that
Well, I'm
point.
trying to solve the mystery. So I mean, I'm giving a theory of laughter that some basis. Other people have said there's some evidence towards it, but they say like no, I mean, factually, laughter is a mystery, and this laughter is just degeneracy or animal nature, and so that laughter is a sign of the victory of animal nature over spiritual nature.
So what's the spiritual equivalent of laughter then?
Well, there is none. There's only the laughter of the righteous at the downfall of the wicked. And that's only funny because you're in the human body. And so it's funny. Really, I'm laughing at myself because the righteous laugh at the downfall of the wicked because the righteous had the desire to sin. So when I want to be a righteous person, so I refrain from sin, and I saw the sinful people doing their sinful behavior, and because I wanted to be righteous, I believe that karma is factual. And so when the wicked eventually have their downfall, the reason I laugh is the animalistic nature, the recognition of in reality, I was jealous of the sinner. I wanted to be the sinner. I refrained from sinning because I believed in karma. And even though temporarily it looked like the wicked were excelling and the righteous were suffering, that I believed. But part of me, the animalistic nature, was saying, sin. Look, these wicked people are sinning and they're prospering, and you're trying to be righteous and you're suffering. So even the laughter of the righteous is still the somewhat say the victory of the animalistic nature, and the righteous laugh because the recognition of that the body material nature of the righteous person also desired sin.
And the righteous person is righteous because they didn't indulge in the sin that everybody wants to do.
Yeah, and so like God forbid, like the friend who calls you up and is joking about how he's tricking everybody and cheating on his wife and telling different people different stories and no one's figured it out. And then like a month later when it all comes crashing down and
Are
saying
you
you have,
talking about someone in particular here or what?
well, God forbid in American society, no, I mean it's just generic. Like it's almost
And this
common.
is so common that it's a trope?
I'm saying that people's behavior is so bad that people will just come right up to you and tell you about their bad behavior and laugh at it.
Look who's in the chat now.
Obviously, you got Ralph there, but um, so I was saying that yeah, I mean, people will just tell you about their degenerate behavior and laugh at it. That society's became so degenerate that people aren't even embarrassed about it. They'll just tell you about it and laugh at it. So say like God forbid, uh, American culture is Western culture is so degenerate that people will tell you about their extramarital affairs and laugh about it. And then like when it all comes crashing down and their wife or their friends find out about it, um, they're saying you could have the laugh last, but it's saying that the righteous person who refrained from acting like that laughs last because the recognition that I was jealous of the sinner when the sinner was telling me of how they're cheating on their wife and getting away with it. I was jealous. I was thinking, wow, maybe I could sin and get away with it. But I knew I couldn't sin and get away with it. But as the wicked person was telling me
You
how they're
can if
sinning,
you're enlightened. You don't form new karmas.
no, I'm saying there's no way to sin and get away with it.
Yeah, if you're enlightened, you don't form new karmas. No such thing as sin.
Well, I'm saying if you're enlightened, I'm saying you don't sin.
That's
But
right.
no, if you sin, it forms karma. I mean,
You can sin
definitionally.
and not get any consequence.
I mean, I would say, I mean, you might have some sort of system. I would say that,
There's essentially no rules for the sovereign.
yeah, I
The
mean, it's not
sovereign
my,
makes the rules. The sovereign isn't subject to them.
well, you're talking to the sovereign, but you're talking about people. People aren't sovereign.
Largely,
People,
no.
not largely no, like never no. People can't sin and get away with it, and the people desire, but people desire to sin and get away with it. And so when you see the wicked sinning and apparently prospering, even though according to the laws of science of karma, that they're not going to prosper, and that it's just apparent, or it's a time frame that temporarily they're prospering, and long term their sin will have consequences, that there is the jealousy factor there, is saying that, well, it looks like the wicked are prospering, and if the wicked could sin and prosper, I want to do that also. And so that's the interpretation of humor on both ends. It's humorous to the wicked because the wicked who don't believe that karma exists find it funny that oh, you actually think that karma exists, ha ha ha. Like there's no such thing as karma. Watch me as I do these horrible things and have absolutely no negative consequence, ha ha ha. And so that's the biblical, the last laugh, where the righteous sees the downfall of the wicked and last laugh. But the laugh of the righteous is also somewhat of a negative thing, because the righteous recognize that I had my moment of doubt when it appeared that the wicked were prospering. It made me question my own righteousness and whether I should also try the path of wickedness.
Yes, that's what happens when you have a zero-sum mentality. Quite unfortunate. Virtue really oughtn't be a zero-sum mentality. No reason that needs to be the case. I got a new diagram. I don't know if you can see it up there. I think I sent it to you.
Yeah, you sent that.
Could you tell what it actually was? Like, can you actually see how there's the first one, and then there's the second one in the middle there on the top. Is it like simplified version of the first one?
Yeah, I mean, it's the same figure eight, and you just have it transposed into a sphere, and then a sphere with the meridian lines drawn in. And I don't know what the one on the bottom left is. That's supposed to be like a brain or figure, and then you have it transposed into the human body with the figure eight in the heart region. So I don't know if the one on the
Well, the figure eight is the digestive system because it connects to the opening. Who made the mycelium, indeed? Tune in next time to find out. Number 4 to me looked a lot like a fish. I don't really see how it looks like a brain. To me, okay, let me see. I'm trying to like get across the like
well, it's just a progression. If you're looking like
harmonics. See how there's a solid surface on the third one, and then it's a vibrating surface on the fourth one, and then it's vibrating even more. It's like collapsing its potentiality. Anyway, I just hope people can actually see it, because I'm thinking some of my diagrams are just people don't like them because they don't understand what they're conveying, but it's a geometric argument, so maybe this will simplify it down and people can see it a little better. But it explains the integrated control of the animal body, because the hyperbolic figure eight complement is a single thing. It's pre-spatial, pre-temporal. It is the computer, or rather the source of the computing, instantaneously interconnected. I guess Ralph's decided to troll you in chat, but take it wherever you like.
With like the knot, I'm saying that it would revert back to its natural shape, like the circle or the line, unless there's a knot in it. That I mean, in reality, like, okay, there is no knot in the digestive system.
Well, there is, obviously, the intestines.
Well, no, so there's not a knot in the digestive system. If you took out the esophagus, the small intestine, the big intestine, it's not knotted.
Well, there's no I mean, this isn't knotted in that sense either. There's no like closure. It loops around but definitely that the digestive system loops around itself. I
Yeah,
don't
but
want
it's not in a knot.
Yeah.
In fact, I'm not sure of any knots in human anatomy. Think about it. If there's
stomach,
any,
the jejunum, the lower and upper intestine, colon, obviously.
well, they don't knot.
Well, yeah, there is a going over. I mean, there's the descending and ascending colon. Think about it.
Yeah, they just loop. They
The
don't
only
knot.
way for it not to double back on itself is if it was just going back, just going straight down, which is obviously not what's happening.
Well, they have valves, but they don't knot.
Yeah, this
I mean,
isn't
if you
that
look at
kind
the
of knot
heart,
either.
even if you look at like the 4-chamber heart, there's no knot in the heart. I mean, the shape, you could say it's parallel, and like from the geometric understanding, it might be useful for understanding shapes. Like I said, like any shape, if it reverted like back to a straight line, and saying once it's knotted, it can't revert back to a straight line. But you're saying the intestine isn't knotted. The intestine doesn't revert back to a straight line. It might have.
It's a tube. Correct?
Yeah, there's no knot in the intestine. There's no knot in the digestive system. Even the stomach, there's no knot that. I mean, even like a toilet, like the system that the toilet uses, not a knot that you could.
Well, then why does the lower intestine go over? Why does the large intestine go over the small intestine?
It's folded, but it's not knotted.
All right, I guess we'll have to do a little more research on this, but I agree the heart's not knotted. That is true.
The
That is
intestine's
very
not
true.
knotted either. It's folded. It's not knotted. There's no knot. You have to define what a knot is, and say that there was no knot in. I'm trying to think of any place in the human body where there's a knot. Even like neuron, I don't think even neurons there's knots.
Well, no, I guess there's no. Well, in the case of an energetic pump, there wouldn't be a literal knot, but I do actually think there might be a literal knot in the digestive tract because it goes over and under itself and such.
There isn't. Saying like, I mean, just like like a cord here on my camera or something like that. You mean you could fold it up like like this, and you have a bunch of folds. There's no knot here, and even if you tie it around like this, it's not a knot. It becomes a knot when like you weave it through and pull. Like it becomes a knot, and even like a figure 8 knot. But there's no knot in the intestine where the intestine goes through itself and pulled through. It's just folded, and like it's not might have a little bit more complicated than a simple folding pattern, but the intestine basically just has a simple folding pattern. There's no knot in it.
Alrighty, so we're looking at a basic pump model to account for motion. So I guess you're saying it's not really a hyperbolic figure 8 complement. It's actually what is it? A torus.
I'm telling you that I can't. I mean, I've taken human anatomy, and I don't think that there's any knots in human anatomy. Because, like, God forbid, when I showed the clip of your tubes tied, like the surgery where a woman has her ovary tied. Like, God forbid, but that's the purpose of that is to prevent pregnancy. That it's not in like the tube tied is a way that it could potentially be untied. So a woman who has her tube tied surgically, where the doctor goes in and puts a knot in the ovary tract, could conceivably, like Tulsi Gabbard, said that her mother, didn't want more children, had her tube tied, and then had her tube untied and was able to have more children. But as far as I know, there's no major anatomical part in the whole body that's knotted. And like, just a simple definition of a knot. A knot is when, you weave it through. It's a knot. Fold is not a knot. You have complicated folding patterns.
John
like
Edwards says the belly button.
belly button's not a knot either. I mean, the belly button is a it's a wound. So I'm saying that it was clipped. It's not a knot. The belly button's a healed wound. That, I mean, there was the umbilical cord. The umbilical cord wasn't knotted, and the belly button, it was the
Right. So
surgical.
you understand the phenomenon of what is it, peristalsis?
I think, I mean, the name sounds familiar, but I'm not sure what you're saying. You're saying something that should be obvious, that there's knots don't exist in human anatomy.
Well, that's like saying margas don't exist.
That what?
Margas don't exist. One of the tenets of Ayurvedic medicine is like margas don't exist. Well, okay.
Well, it'd be something you could quickly show. If there was a knot in human anatomy, you're saying like you pop up diagrams. I have a bunch of anatomy books behind me. You're like, it's not the intestine doesn't have a knot in it.
The knot is the model for the peristalsis pump action.
We say it's a model, but it's not. There is no geometric knot in the intestine.
Get to the guts of a problem. Sure. And then you could just as easily say that you may be right. I'm not sure, honestly. It doesn't matter, in my view, either way.
It doesn't matter if you don't know what you're talking about.
It doesn't matter whether there's a literal knot or not, because the model predicts exactly what you would expect based on, it's the same with the heart. It's like, it doesn't matter if there's a literal knot in the heart. The model, it's going to be it's like, it doesn't matter the calculus isn't right or whatever. I'm sorry if this is the case. I just can't really validate what you're saying right now. So,
Well, just a screenshot. There's no knot here. It's folded.
yeah, and then when it loops back over itself to the upper intestine, it's not a knot.
There's no knot. I mean, I don't know why you're arguing about this. Like, I mean, just make yourself sound foolish, because like this is just basic anatomy.
It's just going over and under itself. Kind of seems.
And not like you weave through, and even to, if you look at the heart, there's no.
I never ever said that there was. By the way, my original model for the heart was 4 spheres inside a larger sphere, if you remember correctly. But obviously, that the hyperbolic figure 8 knot complement is the most generic model for fluid 3+1 dimensional motion. I don't know if that made sense or whatever.
Even like the famous nerve in the eye, it's still not a knot. I mean, just one goes to one side, one goes to the other, but there's no, there's no knot.
Well, are you assuming by knot that it's a fixed point in some way?
I mean, we could look into a mathematical definition of a knot by saying a knot is where you.
It's the complement of a knot.
Through, where it goes over and then you pull through. It doesn't exist in the esophagus. There's no point in the esophagus. You could conceivably have a tied esophagus, but like it doesn't. Like intestine. It doesn't. It just folded. There's no point where the esophagus overlaps itself and pulls through. Like, this is a knot. In human anatomy, you don't have knots.
It's a pump. The model is technically a pump. I'm not disagreeing with you here. Do you understand my argument?
One I could see from a shape, like a
it's a model for motion, but sure.
Yeah, but if you're talking about like a theoretical shape or your structure, like, yeah, I could see that. It's saying like, but I mean, just to say something that doesn't correspond with physical reality. Like no, there's no knots in the intestine.
You know that it's
There's
the
no knots.
complement of a knot,
There's
right?
no
Not a
knots in
knot.
the stomach.
The hyperbolic figure 8 knot complement isn't a knot. You know that, right? It's the complement of a knot, first of all. You understand that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the knot lines up with wherever there's motion or radiance. Which differs depending on where you are, right?
Yeah, I mean, like, okay, I mean, like, it's a neat shape. Is there some like deep insight, and if you even look like a vector field, understanding of some natural nature of like forces and movement of forces?
It's a quantum field because it's pre-space temporal.
So I could see that, but I don't see like how mixing that with anatomical shapes that don't match it is of a benefit.
That's the same argument you'd use against Ayurveda. Plus, I don't know why you're springing this on me in the middle of a show. It's extremely poor form. Would have been able to come up with something better,
Because it
if
was
you had
a
not.
make on your diagram. So I understood your diagram, and then you like I mentioned that there's no knots in the stomach or the intestine, and then you seem to argue that you're saying there are knots. So to get into this, like a factual point that there's like no, I'm pretty sure there's no knots in the.
Okay, I said,
stomach
well,
or the
it's a
intestine.
loop. Okay, I thought there was a loop. Maybe I'm wrong, but honestly, I don't trust your interpretation well enough to vouch for it. So can we just leave it at this, and I'll research it?
I mean, okay, like I mean, good luck.
Yeah, I mean, okay, sure. If I'm wrong, I'm completely fine if I'm wrong in this sense, and I will note it. But do you understand that even if there isn't a physical loop, that it is still fine as a model? The loop is not the salient point. The connectivity between the outer boundary and the inner boundary is the important part. The fact that there's a continuous inside.
Well, I'm not sure you modeled anything. All you did was transpose your inverse figure 8 onto the human body. Whether that's
Right.
useful or indicative of informative of anything is yet to be shown. I could possibly see what like it might be
Well, it
informative.
accounts for the instantaneously interconnected mind, if that wasn't already self-evident. We have a question of how can the mind be instantaneously interconnected, and it's because this shape is the mind is, well, I mean, I don't want to say it is the mind, but there's a template, and then the mind is a lot closer to that template than the body is. Yeah. Moral Outrage Prophet says, fruiting body, bro. The aesthetic is great. I'm sorry, one of my windows is frozen here. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to get it back, and if I close it, it might just, my entire computer might crash. So I don't know if I want to attempt it. But you do realize that if that, if what you said is the case, it's just a matter of switching the formula to a simpler formula, to the torus formula. I could just switch it into torus and it would be the exact same thing. But I don't think that would work because I wouldn't be able to model the peristalsis motion. And that was another thing I thought was extremely effective, was that how it, and I haven't actually finished my presentation on this, but how it induces motion. And I wanted to share, it's hilarious. I really wanted to share this image, but every single one of my image sharing things like are frozen right now. My Finder is frozen, sadly, so I'm not gonna be able to do it right this minute. My whole computer might just be like dying because it's going to the point where I can't even control any of my programs. So we'll just see what happens. Dang it. This is actually a really good point. This is actually a really good point that you're making, though, and I appreciate it, because this is like the exact same argument that gets used against Ayurveda all the time, is that, oh, these concepts don't exist because we can't observe them. And it's like the observations come about because of the existence of these objects. The objects are pre-physical and they are information-rich primitives, which allows you to make better judgments about how to measure the system in advance of measurement. If
Well,
that
I'm not arguing
helps.
against Ayurveda. I'm just saying that there's no knots
I'm
in
not
the.
saying that you are. I'm just saying that that's the exact same form as the arguments against Ayurveda. So I
If you're
guess it's
saying
good to
something
go into
like
them.
dual, if you're, I mean, I understand more on a dualistic nature, so it doesn't have a one-to-one correspondence to something in the material anatomy that so I was just making the point, and then that I mean, maybe you just didn't do your research that you think there's knots in the material anatomy that I don't think there is. But if you're talking like a dualistic nature of the nature of or even material forces, even something like magnetic forces or uh, spatial entropy or something like that. But I mean, just something factual that could be researched, like are there knots in the human anatomy or not? Uh, it doesn't have anything to do with spirituality or rejection of Ayurveda or any of these things.
You're just repeating yourself at this point.
So you want to wrap up? We go like 3 hours.
Sure. I don't know. It doesn't look like there's too many questions in the audience or anything about all this stuff. But I was looking for. Let's see if my application can relaunch and I can throw that. I really want to show this diagram that I made, but it's not. I'm for some reason unable to load it right now. So maybe that's just a sign to wrap her up for now, and we'll come back to the drawing board next time. I think I've got one of those problems where way too many programs open at once. But yeah,
Make
good
that
talk.
money. Buy the better equipment. Um, I haven't mentioned like my eBay business is at all-time high now.
Oh, congratulations. Oh, someone actually did ask if you wanted to go into this before the end of the show about a review of your new computer. I couldn't remember if you'd fully gone into that.
Yeah, I mean, I've only used it for streaming and playing YouTube videos. So my other computer was overheating, and like the video and audio quality was having issues. So like I got it. I haven't done anything other than besides that. So in terms of that, like Tinkle does other things. I'm not sure. Then also like the financial considerations. You're gonna spend $2,600 if you could meet your needs or but like yeah, I needed a new computer. I wanted better sound and mic quality, and to relieve because I'm basically on my computer all day and I listen to watch videos and listen to stuff all day on the same computer. So I relieve that stress off of my business computer by doing all that on the Mac. But if you have other stuff that you're doing that you should research it. I so I don't necessarily have a review to make. I have almost 2,000 books listed. I keep on getting more. I'm probably going to keep on getting more. I could almost hire an employee. Like I'm almost at the point I could hire somebody. I have like thousands of books upstairs that I could put up, and like it just takes a lot of time to organize and list them. I could probably afford now to hire somebody. If anyone's in this area and wants to work for Doovid's bookstore, you could reach out. Uh, but yeah, been talking about the hero's journey because I'm selling mostly literature. Like I have a lot of nonfiction stuff up, but the vast majority of I have is fiction and specifically science fiction. Probably like half of my listings are science fiction. I have a lot of generic fiction. So, I was talking about music mostly today. Maybe I'll do some research also on just the narrative arc, the hero's journey in general. So like I'm enjoying selling books. Maybe maybe I'll get an employee, to think about it, how I do it, like a part-time employee that would, like list books because I have thousands of books now that I need to list, and then even to you know, to wrap up and ship out the books. So I'll have to see how excited I am to expand my business. Um, but yeah, so maybe I'll talk more about narrative arc and the hero's journey just in general fiction literature, although I don't read fiction. But I haven't been studying as much math because I've been working more organizing books and putting them up and selling more books on a regular basis. uh, but I'm still pounding through these math books, and I want to continue my research, consciousness research, math and science, and get back to more of that. I am doing regular study on it. But these last few weeks, I've been focusing on expanding my business a little bit, and it could be the next few weeks will also be like that, and then maybe I'll be at a point where I'll be able to get an employee, and then I'll be able to do more research, get back to doing more research, and also think like Week in Review, where I was encouraging Jennifer to publish, but it's unclear where our research is going, so we just kind of talk and blabber. Uh,
Well, I
so
would like to focus predominantly on the Kurt Jai show, frankly, and making that good. So everything else is sideline for that. I mean, I still have my regular activities and whatnot, but that's where I'm focusing most of my energies in terms of presenting and how to present and what to say, and to keep it to something reasonable. Well, we didn't really go into that this week, but
when you say that you got to give him a video. I
I'm
mean,
going to
when you want,
make a video. He didn't ask for one, but just for my own notes and to have something good and ready to go. And I've done so many interviews and stuff where it's been largely improvisational, and I'd like it to be more formal and prepared for this one. So basically, gonna set it
I
up
mean,
with a. I mean, so far my idea is to do a counter proof or a tentative proof by contradiction, I suppose, of a hypothetical or of a particular form of a hypothetical unified field model, and then explain how you would go through developing unified field models that would be domain specific, and then how you could potentially use computers to do that, and how in a lot of ways we're already using these results of the universal computer, God mind, whatever you want to call it.
just avow yourself to the process is like make a flow chart and then organize your flow chart into a table of contents, and then from there you could either write or make a video. But I mean, you start with a flow chart and then you organize the flow chart into like a table of contents, and then you expand it. So
I have a
if you're
hard time
thinking,
with that as a full on plan, because everything is cyclic, and that means there's no technical beginning or end. So I've got to decide which portion of it makes most sense to present. And I'm having a bit of trouble with the overarching theme.
well, I mean, it's like your writer's block. You got to start with a flow chart. If you can't start with a flow chart, like you may not start. And so if you have a little bit of a problem with that, like you got to get over that hump. You got to produce a flow chart.
Well, I do have a tentative order, which is it's just a question: are we going to include the part at the beginning with the counterproof? So counterproof. So the shortest possible thing would just be an explanation of the cosmological generating model in the link that he put on his channel, and then I could expand that to opening with this counterproof, and expand that to a brief overview of all the models that I have. I don't know if you remember, but I have a lot written for me on psychology, and that's a predictive model. It's fairly simple, but I could probably spend an hour going into that with no preparation whatsoever. But I should definitely get, obviously, an outline. And other than that, the quantum periodic table, I could go into that more because it leads to all the other various things, because the hyperbolic figure eight complement is connected to the quantum periodic table. And I know you're showing some doubts, and it's good to be, it's good to be critical sometimes. But in a lot of ways, in my opinion anyway, the complement of the hyperbolic figure eight is more potent than the quantum periodic table. because we already know a lot about that stuff. Having
I just
already
only doubt. I
covered
just
it.
told you there's no knot in the intestine. It wasn't like a doubt. It is like you said that you mentioned the intestines.
Well,
I
you're
just pointed out
implying that
there's
that
no,
means something, right? It's like, okay,
it just means what I said. There's no knot in the intestine. And so if you can test it that there is a knot in the intestine, like, so I put up, pictures of the anatomy, is like, there's no knot.
there's a loop though, isn't there? It's not a
And it's saying just like,
continuously descending
I'm not
organ,
down,
is it?
you're saying
It's
like,
not okay. Is it a
you avow
continuously
yourself to the
descending organ,
process
or is it a
and then
looping
you'll
organ?
make,
Does it go up
then
and
you'll make
down and up and
progress.
down? Okay.
Until you avow yourself to the process, I just skeptical there's not going to be any progress. Like saying like you're not going to publish a paper, you're not going to make the video, you're not going to have a organized good talk
We're
on
still
Chaimongo.
working on the
If you avow
outline.
yourself to the process, you'll have results.
What the fuck
If
does
you do,
there not maybe being a literal knot in the intestines tentatively have to do with anything?
well, I mean, you're just argumentative for no reason. It's just stupidity. And so you could have just said, no, you're right. There's no knot in the intestine. But instead, you turn that into some argument, as opposed to just
Well,
something you
first
could
of
have
all,
looked
I'm
up.
not saying there's a knot in the
You could have
intestine.
just accepted
I'm
like
not
Doooovid
saying there's a knot in the intestine.
with
First of all, I
university
never said there was a
anatomy.
knot in the intestine.
You
So
could have
you're straw
accepted that
manning me, and you're
Doovid
like,
with
why
his
won't you stand
university
by this
level
straw
anatomy
man?
understanding
And then
could have
you're
told you
doubling
that.
down and repeating the exact same thing over and over. It's like, I'm going to have to go over this in more detail here. Because as I understand it, there are loops, i.e., it is not a continuously going down thing. It is goes down for a bit, then goes up, then goes down, and goes up in a
Those are
curving
called
manner.
folds.
Right. There's folds. So the question is, how many folds are there, right? So I cannot do it right now in a diagram because sadly my my computer has, like I said, my finder's frozen. But yeah, we'll just leave it to next time. But back to the Kurt Jaimungal thing. The question is, how much time do I want to spend on individual topics? And is he actually going to let me talk about the individual topics of my unified field model? Because there's the chemistry, well, there's the quantum periodic table, the biological physics, as well as the psychology work that I did quite a while ago about the imperatives of consciousness.
Okay, so let's just end it. Just get dumb or argumentative. So
This is the part where you tell me what you think about that order, not dumb or argumentative. This is the part like I'm asking you, what do you think about that as a?
Well, I mean, you'll do your homework and I'll review it. So like it's the end of the show, and now like you're pretending like you did some homework.
I'm always contemplating things.
So you do the preparation, then there'll be something to review. So like now the show's ending, and like just do the work, and then we'll have something to review.
I just told it to you, and I'm waiting for a comment back. I have done the work. I summarized my thoughts as to what I was going to present, and you're saying that's not good enough. And I'll say, all right, well, I don't know what to tell you. You need it written out, I guess.
Well, I mean, that'd help. It'd be useful.
Right. For who?
For like the audience, for someone trying to understand what you're talking about.
Okay. Even though I've said multiple times it's not something you can understand. It's not something you can understand. The only thing that matters is whether you can work with an incomplete understanding of something. Even though I said that a million times, you're saying, well, make me understand, make me understand. Like, all right. I will write out my tentative list of subjects.
Okay, great. So next week we'll have something to review.
Well, I'm more interested. I heard you know exactly what's going on, and I'm more interested in stuff like, should I talk for 3 hours or 4 hours?
You might doubt that's up to you anyway, so I don't think there's any reason to think. And I mean, unless you're just going to straight out ask him beforehand that it's going to be up to him, not you. So either you should just ask him, and like you don't even know whether you're going to be on a show or booked. So like it's kind of pointless to talk about it. And if you are going to talk about it, like talk about it directly with him.
I thought I went over this already. He has a mutable character, and that implies he's going to possibly allow the guest some degree of creative control over the content.
Yeah, I'm not sure that I'm.
You don't believe me?
Well, I mean, yeah, man, and it's saying like I don't think you have any special like mind reading capability to his is saying, let's like he
Even
told you
though,
this.
what does the evidence say?
Well, I'm saying that I don't believe in these phenomena. So like if he said it, but your suppositions about his character or how he does things, it's like hearsay. So either you show a clip or you show like his statement saying it. So if you believe this is how he acts, is largely meaningless. So to say like you communicated with him, he told you this, that's meaningful. Your guess on how he operates is
You really think what people do? Okay, what's more indicative
I
of
mean, for
what
me, I would just find it
is what they
irritating.
do or what they say? What's
If you
more
were
indicative
telling
of
other
people?
people, like I know Doovid, this is how he acts. Like this is how I understand that he acts. Like I would just find that irritating. I would rather have you say, I asked Doovid, and this is what he said. So just like, oh, my understanding of of how he's going to do things, as opposed to his understanding of how he does things. So your understanding of how he does things is not completely meaningless, but basically meaningless. So either
No,
you,
if someone doesn't have like practice, then what they think about their own shit is the one that's meaningless. If you don't believe in a phenomenon, what you think about it is meaningless.
well, I mean, so you either reach out and spoke with him and asked him, or you're just speculating, and your speculations are rather worthless.
Yeah, well, there might
And it shows like
yeah, with the
it
speculating.
shows
I
like
thought that's what the show was about, was speculations about consciousness research. Now I'm getting recognition. You're like, oh, well, it's fucking worthless to talk about. It's like, no, that's the whole point.
yeah, I mean, that's speculation about like streaming. So either you're not connected with them to reach out
You
and just
don't get
ask
to
them.
say where consciousness stops and starts because guess what? Panpsychism. So it's always relevant to bring up consciousness. Always.
You're speculating about
And I'm
someone else's
speculating
actions.
accurately, and you're denying it on, principles, bases that have no
Or I just making a point
reasonableness.
about your speculation about how he's going to run his show. To me, is pointless. It's worthless. If you're not in a situation to
And it's not about
communicate
how
with him,
he's going to run his show. It's about how I'm going to present my stuff on his show. If I just go on and say, hey, Kurt, what do you want me to talk about on your show? Versus, hey, I could talk about this, or this, and it doesn't matter, and I'm down with whatever. That's a completely different vibe, and sort of seems
yeah, I mean, it's
dishonest not
just
to acknowledge
it's
that.
bad content. He's saying that if either you should be having this conversation with him. So if you're just speculating about the conversation you should be having with him, it's a bad sign. And there's no really other way to take
Why?
it.
It's called preparation, and you don't like
Yeah,
the
so
way
if
I'm
you
preparing.
preparate how your show with him is gonna go with him, and so you discussed it
No,
like so you're saying you haven't discussed this with him,
it's
and so that's
irrelevant.
a bad sign.
It's irrelevant what I've discussed or not
And then
discussed with
if you're
Kurt.
saying more, I don't even need to discuss it with him because I know him so well
This
that
is Week in Review
that
with Doovid, not Week in Review with Kurt. The whole point is us discussing consciousness studies, and part of it is the recognition for my work in consciousness, which you seem to want
yeah, I
to
mean, so from
deny
my
because you've been
perspective,
unable this far to acknowledge it for what it is.
well, I'm acknowledging I'm the one working together with you, but talking about your stream with Kirk. So I'd say part of me is like skeptical whether it's actually going to even happen, whether
Because
he's
you're
even
an
going to have.
unbeliever, but put that to the side.
I'm not an unbeliever. I'm just saying
You're
that
being not particularly objective if you have all your unbeliever feelings clouding your vision.
no, I'm not an unbeliever. I'm saying that like like if it was going to happen, there'd be a date scheduled. Like if it's not scheduled, it's
You
not
are an
booked.
unbeliever.
It may
You're
or may not
projecting your
happen.
own
Like if you had a link,
expectations on how we're going to do things.
I mean, even just the way you're going about it, to me, just it's a bad sign. God forbid. And then you're going to get argumentative with me over it. It's just a bad sign. So like if you were booked, you'd be booked. If you had a date, there'd be a date. If you had communication with him and you had some direct message from him you could share, you'd be sharing that. The fact that you don't have it, it's a bad
No,
sign.
you'd be doing that, but you're projecting your preferences on me. And I'm doubling down on my preferences out of irritation.
No, I'm saying it's just professional saying you're not. Uh, I mean, God forbid. Like I'm not here to diminish your hopes and dreams, but you're saying that like you're not really getting anywhere, and like your fantasies about like your accomplishments that don't actually exist. Like make accomplishments. Don't substitute fantasies in your head about accomplishments that don't exist. Focus on actually making accomplishments.
Like preparing for a show. that I haven't gone on yet. Guaranteeing a future success. Anyway, the point is, I just want to know if there's anything else I should talk about. You mentioned the whole historical review. You think there's time for a historical review on something like that, Joe?
I have no idea. I mean, these are all generic things I've been advising you for like years now that you should do. When you do them, you'll probably be able to write a book, publish papers, have good appearances, and until you do it, my speculation is that you'll continue to fail.
And it's your opinion that I've failed thus far?
Well, in terms of goal-oriented, that you failed at these objectives, and that you'll continue to fail at these objectives until you avow yourself to the process. So I'm saying you're a failure as a person. I'm saying you're a failure in the sense of these objectives that I've set out that seem reasonable for you to accomplish, that you have yet to accomplish them. Like you're not a regular, popular internet guest on shows. You haven't published a book or a paper. You're very rarely are you invited as a guest to talk about your ideas on other platforms, let alone major platforms. So like I say, we've been doing this over 2 years. The fact that you haven't achieved that yet is a failure. Doesn't mean you're a failure as a person, but saying those objectives, that you failed to meet them. And so, my speculation.
I agree. I failed to meet your objectives of my success.
I would call some sort of objective measure of success.
Of course you would.
I mean, you still have a crappy computer. I mean, not my point to harp on your failures, but no, I don't see any benefit on having propping yourself up with fake accomplishments. You just focus on goals and achieving.
How does preparing
goals.
To go on the Kurt Show qualify as propping myself up with fake accomplishments?
Because you're preparing for irrelevant things.
You say it's irrelevant, but I say it's relevant.
And even to speculate, either if you're not in communication with him to ask these questions to him directly, if that's your situation, that's your situation. Yeah. And okay. So
have you ever heard of a book called I'm trying to remember, I think it's Freakonomics, but I could be remembering it wrong, but it's this idea that you can tell a lot about a person just by looking in their bedroom, and they talk to people, do an inquiry as to how well friends knew each other, and it turned out that there was a certain class of properties that a person who didn't know you but it's been 10 minutes in your room could tell better about you than a person who knew you very well. And that means that what a person does is perhaps just as important as what they say. And so there may be limited returns on what can be attained through a voice conversation. You seem to not understand.
What you're telling me about Kurt Jaimon just doesn't make sense to me. I'm thinking
okay, you can still help me though, and tell me if you think.
No, I can't help you because what you're saying doesn't make sense.
It's a good order.
If you're saying doesn't make sense, so
it's just the generic stuff. Exactly. I don't know why this is hard to. All I'm asking is your opinion as to the aesthetic of the presentation of the argument in that form, and it sounds like what you don't want to give me your opinion.
Well, I'm saying your thoughts are not well organized or structured, and so if I've been talking to you a few years and I'm telling you that, almost certainly anyone else who listens to you, or someone that listened to you for a first time is going to think that. And so just structure and organize your thoughts. And I've told you what you need to do that. I've basically been consistent in that for a few years now, and you've yet to do it.
Oh, you keep saying stuff that probably violates the tradition in a number of ways, and I keep saying, no, I'm not going to rape the tradition, and you're saying it doesn't matter what your beliefs are, and I say, yes, it does, and then we end up in a stalemate. And now I'm saying I can give you a list. Disproof, explanation of unified field model, explanation of psychological unified field model, and discussion of whatever topics Kurt would like to discuss, and possible historical review, which we've been over earlier, but I'm still sort of Not sure if it's even worth making one, and if I am going to make one, I should probably just commit to an amount of time that it's going to be, and then pick the things I want to discuss based on that time. So even if anyone in the audience has ideas on that, like if you were watching this interview, how long would you want to watch? How long would you want it to be spending on a historical review? Given that I don't really know how much use there is to a historical review, but it might be interesting. I did do a historical review in my or I think it was, I want to say it was the T-Jump debate, but that's wrong. Maybe it's the one right before that one. Anyway. But yeah, that is a format. That's the general format. To me, that's what more do you want from that? That's a general format. Then I'm going to expand that to a series of things that will take, several hours. Are you saying this is a good idea to go forward with, or good structure? Or no, that's not followable. I have to write that down in a list. I don't understand.
No, I mean, structure has to, having your ideas structured is important for its own sake. Like the structure of how he's going to do his show is something that you have to agree with him about. And so either like you message him and you talk with him about
I
it.
have to. Oh God.
And if so, you're saying you can't like message him and talk with him about it. Like it just seems, and then like it seems like it's going to be a crap show.
If somebody is in the audience who understands what the F is going on here and can try to help me out, maybe that would be great to chirp in here.
You're saying you're talking about how you're going to have your show with Kirk. You have to talk about that with him. And if you haven't, it doesn't make any sense to me. So either like you're not in contact with him, he doesn't return your messages, or you can't like it seems like the most simple thing that you would like message him and talk about what you're going to talk about. And say like you would message him and give him like I want to talk about these things, and did you have anything you want to mention? And if you did, I don't even say why you wouldn't be able to share that on Week in Review, or if you had some reason like you messaged him and told him, and he messaged you something back, and you can't share that on Week in Review, or you're saying you're not even in contact with him where you could message him and say like this is what you want to talk about, and did he have anything he wants to? But you can't structure a show with a person one way. I mean, it's his show. You have to talk about with him. I mean, it's just going to be
I'm not going to do that because I already have, and I'm not going to go back to Kurt until I have a finished product.
Yes, I'm taking that as like it's probably not going to happen. You're not even going to be on a show, or like maybe eventually, maybe eventually you will be, but like it doesn't even sound like it's happening. Like if it was happening, like you say, like no, I mean you're in contact, you messaged him, and like you're working out these details. So it sounds like I mean reasonably. It just
sort of feels like at this point you're not even listening. It's like I'm not doing that until I have the things.
You're not making sense.
I'm not setting up the details. I've already talked to him. I'm not going to move to set up details until it's done because I don't know how long it's going to take. I'm not changing that. I don't know what's hard to understand about that. That I don't want to blather every last communication I have online.
It's not much private about it. I was saying, like, I mean, especially but I was saying, so until you've done that, there's really nothing. Like, there's not much to discuss about going on the show. So it's just you organizing your thoughts. It's got really nothing to do with him and his show, and saying that you trying to get on his show or eventually being on his show as some sort of incentive for you to structure and organize yourself. You could use that as your own incentive to do that. And, so Doooovid just believes in the process and the system and said, like, no, unfortunately, I think you're going to fail. Like, nothing personal. It's just like you're not avowed to the process. You're probably going to fail.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. Right? He might be like, you want to go tomorrow? And if all I have is a, Don says,
if you were together, it would have meant you be together. That you say like you're ready for an interview at any time with anybody.
What? Where the hell did that come from?
Well, so if you're together, you're ready for an interview with anybody at any time. mean, it's good to prepare, but it's saying like, no, you're not together. You're not ready to present, whatever it is you think you have. You're not ready to present it really to anybody, let alone like, just like, okay, like Kurt Uncle and theories
Well, I
of
went on
everything.
your channel and
But
explained reincarnation, didn't I?
yeah, you had, I mean, you at least do when you had something prepared on a given topic.
And this topic is like I could put reincarnation in the unified field model.
Yeah,
That could
now we're
be
just going to go in
one of the
circles.
topics.
I'm saying like it's you who has to organize your thoughts, or you're just not going to have any success in streaming. It's just going to be me and you having this dumb argument week after week that like I myself am getting tired of. I think the audience, like everyone's getting tired of it.
Alrighty.
So I mean, just like okay, like do something, and then we could review it. But like just like circle, either you're going to do it or you're not. And if you didn't do it, there's nothing to review. You're just
Well, I
talking
just
about your
told you,
hope.
and you didn't
You're just
offer
talking
any
about your
comment
hopes
as to
and
the
fantasies
format.
for
And
the
so you're
future.
just basically saying you don't want to review it in the form that I'm offering it in. You want me to rewrite it in a different form. And I'll get to that when I get to that, but I tend to get to things in the order that I get to them. And there's no
That's what I
real
said. If you were
rush with this.
well structured and organized, you could basically do an interview anytime with anybody.
Spoken like a person who has no clue what they're talking about.
Spoken like a person who could do an interview with basically anybody anytime.
Not on these kinds of topics. All you're doing is parroting what other people have said. You're not deriving novel insights on the fly.
Well, I mean, I can't talk about what I don't know, but I could do an interview with basically anybody anytime.
You can't talk about what you don't know, but you can parameterize the necessary conditions on knowledge you don't understand.
Yeah, I'm not going to be a guest on a channel where the topic matter I don't know anything about. But I could do an interview with anybody anytime. I didn't say I could do an interview on any topic anytime. I could do an interview where I could represent myself and my thought basically to any person anytime. And say I could talk about any topic. And you're like, no, I can't talk about any topic. A lot of things I don't know about. But I could, do an interview. I could explain myself and my ideas to basically any person anytime because I have it well organized and thought out.
You have a lot of words memorized.
And so I mean, here you're attacking me, and so it's just dumb. I mean, because
Well, you're not attacking me at all here. You're not really acknowledging anything I'm saying and just pretty much doubling down on the same thing. Now, I asked you a question. You didn't offer any response. So why would I think it'd be any different if there was going to be a list? Like it's just going to be a list of the same exact thing that I said and theories that are already all out there. It's not about the theories. It's about how does it get presented on that channel in a way that's best for everybody involved. And I guess if I don't, hold people's hand through the entire thing, then it's just not going anywhere.
Yes,
which is fine, but it's like would be nice if people were cooperative to help me versus constantly attacking me, and that doesn't make me feel very much like doing much if I'm just constantly being attacked.
I don't feel I'm attacking you. I'm just saying that results are results, and like when they're there, they'll be there, and
Sure. Okay, well, I guess
I'm a goal-oriented person, and like I want to see, and like I'm generally avowed to processes, and just these like stupid argumentative thing like week after week. It's just like dumb and repetitive. It's not going anywhere. Like say goals and meeting goals, and the method towards meeting those goals, and just like dumb, stupid, repetitive arguments. It just doesn't interest me.
Then why haven't you signed off? And you've been complaining about the same thing for half an hour now.
Okay, so I guess have a good week.
You too. Hey, audience. Yeah, so my point's clearly not getting across. Now, could I improvise something on Kurt's tomorrow? Probably. Would it be good? Possibly. Because sometimes when you go in completely fresh with zero impression, you get this like magical, I don't know, chemistry thing. I don't know what we're going to call it, Obviously, that would be a terrible mistake with someone like Kurt, but, you know, it's a possibility. Hey. And I've done it enough times to know that it's addictive and it's fun and it's the way to do it for throwaway convos with people you just couldn't give two fucks about, right? But obviously with someone like Kurt, this is basically the complete opposite. That's my dream come true to go on a show like, I'm not just saying that. It's my whatever. It's great if this could happen. And I feel there are a number of ways it could go off the rails, and I'm definitely overanalyzing it, but that's sort of what I want to at least make sure I've gone over all the different possible problems that could happen with that. So let's just assume I already have an intro and then I already have my proof set up as to why you can't have a unified field model. And that's basically going to be that there is a physical model. It's just too vague because it applies on all levels. It's mostly too vague. The physical theory applies on all levels, so it's just like quantum stuff. So quantum periodic table. How useful is that? To me, it's very useful because I could see the proto-space-time events and stuff. Most people probably not so useful. Something like consciousness, well, that's useful. And it's also transcendent. It's on all the scales. It's great. It's the ground of measurement, though, so there's issues with measuring it. But you can measure the ground of measurement. It's just that you're necessarily dealing with a self-referential system. Oh, John Edwards says he supports me 100%. Thank you. Really appreciate that. Always nice. Yeah, Skyworks, I get that. That's my whole issue here is that Kurt is one of the most mutable people I've ever seen. For an interviewer, that's great. And it allows me a tremendous amount of freedom. But with freedom comes responsibility. Let's try to keep the manager cliches to a minimum, please. I know that the people in the chat have good intentions, but really these empty words, what would help for me is, what do you like to see? I asked before, how long should a historical review be? I don't look at it as an absolute time. I would look at the historical review as a percent maybe of the total time. And it's just really hard. Okay, Don, you did another cliche. Everyone knows that's the sublime ridiculous quote. It's just so damn cliche. Let's reframe it here. I know. And that's another issue with that channel is there's a lot of whack jobs on it. So I don't just want to be perceived as just another crank. Which is why I want to avoid anything that may be all reminiscent of what's his name? The Taylor's guy. Anyway. I'm so excited because this is like my Kobayashi Maru thing. And when it does happen, it's going to be like, eee. Yeah, probably won't put my hair down because Kurt has a wife that I just don't think she would like that. So I do want to be respectful. Like you saw how clean that kitchen is. And that's intimidating. So just have to remember not to get too. Maybe I could sort of do it that, like, if things go off too much into the weeds, I have some sort of way of catching that and bringing it back to a good direction. I don't want it to become, I don't want it to have the impression of self indulgence. Like, oh my God, what happened? What you're supposed to say, Dawn, is what you like to see. And stop lying to yourself to think that you can fucking help me on that level because it's arrogant and annoying and condescending. You have no clue. Just let that illusion go and move forward with, I like the color pink, to your observations about your own personal aesthetic preferences. It's not hard. It's called be honest with yourself here. The basics, like what the fuck does that mean? It really depends on the topic. Like there are general large scale or not broad strokes sort of categories I could draw. But even that, it's not that it's not that simple with Kurt. Once everything is framed, it'll be fine. But to the point that it's not framed, there will be some challenges in connecting on the level of that he seems to want to connect with a lot of his guests, which is like understanding motivations via large analysis of a person's history. Yeah. Don't be arrogant in the slightest. Take his Xanax beforehand. My friend was really into beta blockers. He said he got nervous when he did public speaking and he took beta blockers and that helped. But I don't think that's going to happen because I love talking in front of huge crowds. And in a way, the bigger the crowd, the more I like it. And Victoria says I have to set a time limit. I don't want to. Like, I don't care if it has to go on for a really long time. Whatever we end up talking, I just don't want to talk about something that is actually like going to just be a bad influence on people. For example, spending hours off in the weeds about some piece of minutia about my personal life that is not really sailing into anything. An impersonalist to then, you know, there's issues of hypocrisy, plus I have to mention personal preferences, but those aside, an impersonalist to dwell on personal issues, somewhat contradiction there. I do accept the risk. I absolutely accept the risk. I just don't want to have anything happen that was unanticipated on the show. Of course, I accept the risk. And the stakes for a show like this, they're pretty high. But at the same time, like, I'd be lying if I said that I wasn't happy with a lot of the progress that I had seen other people make on their own in domains that are important, like quantum computing, etc. And I really want to go through that soon, but I got a little tied down, so I didn't get all my stuff organized. We'll save that for next week, but I'm going to try. I'll say that I'll try to get it done. The motion induction article, because I do have a good diagram which I wanted to share, but I think broke, and that'll be done by next week. I will commit to that. And everyone tune in for the whole show. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Looking forward to the next one. See you all next Sunday, if not sooner. And hopefully we could do more of those Saturday shows or whatever. That was a lot of fun. And check it out, the